Good evening. Before we get started, I know we have a full agenda and we have a lot of people that need to present and talk. I'm going to let the Vice Mayor just chat really quick with everybody and we'll go ahead and go from there. So
I just wanted to make it public. Over the last 3 years, I've passed up a couple opportunities to change my primary residence, and I have an opportunity right now to do so. So I am. And at the end of the month, I will be stepping down off of council. In leadership, we just had a discussion kind of moving forward how that looks and trying to be fair on who will be chosen to fill my spot and Councilman Johnson's spot. And so I'll let Ray take that from here as far as what we've come up with, but just want to be fair and not really have it be the council to pick, but let the voters be the ones to pick who comes on the council. So,
thanks, Steve. When's your last day? I didn't really look on the letter. Sorry.
The 31st.
The 31st is your last day.
So this is your last meeting?
This is his last meeting. So we can save all the ooey gooey comments about Steve until the council around the table. If you so choose, Amber, but you don't have to. You don't want to. So we chatted a little bit about kind of moving forward, and so having to expedite it as quickly as possible. So we do have in the past, Jai was the last who had to apply about a year ago, and so we're going to move that application process pretty quickly, and so we're going to open it up tomorrow for both Ward 3 and Ward 2. Out of fairness, one of the things that I'd like to suggest, and was suggested by Carter and our city clerk, to be fair, is that we wouldn't consider the people currently running for office, only because we feel like that would give an undue advantage to them in the race. And so we want to make sure that we don't do that. So we're going to open it up to anybody else in Ward 3 or 2, if council okays that. The second part of it is that we would close the application process on the 31st, and then we would plan on trying to meet that week of the 6th in order to do either, if we don't have a lot of applicants, we could do it prior to our meeting on the that Tuesday, or the 7th, which would be a Wednesday. We'd have to do a special meeting to do interviews if we have several more that we would need to be able to do. So I'd like to offer that up and see what everybody thinks. Any concerns, questions? Yeah.
We actually were discussing this before you guys came in, and I completely understand where you're coming from. The pickle it puts us in is we're bringing somebody in for 4 months and then literally changing those seats completely over again in January. So I don't know how you would, it's what we were discussing, how do you do that without giving somebody an unfair advantage in the race, but how do you also do it without putting us in a bind, trying to get somebody up to speed for 4 months and then they're out. Guaranteed to be out because nobody in the race is in. So I'm sure it's a question for the city attorney as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I kind of saw this looming coming, try to look at all different types of options and what was trying to be the fairest option for us to replace it, because this is unprecedented for Casper. I know Carter, I asked him, I said, have you ever been a part of this? And he has not. So that's not always easy, especially with Carter with so much experience, hasn't seen this. And so, we're kind of trying to figure out how to replace 2 seats right after a primary and then hitting right into a general election, which is literally 3-4 months away. And so I don't think there's any situation that's perfect, and I agree 100%, because you're right. Let's say we appoint someone and then they've got 4 months. Jai just knows this recently, how long it's taken you to get settled and figure it all out just recently. And so you're still figuring it out.
I've been here 18 months and I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been here almost 8 years and I still don't know what I'm doing.
Do I know what I'm doing here?
But let alone having somebody to do that. And so I think this was our best option. And so we can continue to discuss. So I got Kyle, and then I'll come back to Steve and then Jai. So go Kyle.
Thanks, Mayor. A couple thoughts. I've been thinking about this as well. How much value does it have bringing somebody who's not currently running in for 3-4 months, because it takes at least that just to know what the hell you're doing, let alone like feel competent at what you're doing. So I would love, if we go that direction, I would love to reach out to folks that have served on council before or have served in similar positions who understand how meetings like this, you know, they understand Robert's rules, they understand the procedure, they can just step in, and maybe they even have some knowledge about how the city functions because they've previously served on council or worked for the city or something. I would love to have some placeholders that have some of that institutional knowledge so that they just need to be brought up on the speed on the issues and not everything.
So I can tell you that confidentially, I won't say who it is, a couple people have reached out already that have expressed if you need a placeholder, to please put possibly my name in the mix. And I know that you'll make a decision as a council, obviously, and so we'll be fair about that, but that they would be considered, they don't want to run again. But
Well, they
would-
couldn't anyway.
Yeah, they can anyway, but that they would definitely just be a placeholder. So yes, that's been already reached out literally today, so.
Oh, good.
Good to
That's
know.
fine.
That's what I would advocate for. Follow-up question, what are the rules? I mean, with us losing 2 at one time, there wouldn't be any concern about a split vote or anything.
As far as the even council,
Yeah,
the 8-8.
we'd still have an
or,
odd number.
They have to be filled
They have to be.
by
filled.
law, yes.
So Carter did call me last week when we were kind of seeing this heading down this road, and there were a couple options we were trying to consider, and Carter let me know that he had checked in with John, and John had recommended that we have to fill the seats. We just couldn't leave them open until the election. That was one of the, I think there were 3 or 4 different avenues we were trying to figure out.
Right.
As we were heading in. So.
Okay, thanks.
Let me see, Steve.
No, I think you just pretty much, question was answered, that there had been interest shown from past council members. So that option's there if they apply, you plug them right in, they go right to work. So that's all I was gonna say.
Jai, and then Steve, and then Bruce.
Okay, so 2 questions. So just to confirm dates, you said 31st of August.
Correct.
Okay, so 31st of August and then meeting 6th or 7th.
Yeah, so we'll have our first meeting. Our hope is that we're just gonna miss 1 meeting without council members.
Okay.
So that would be the 6th, either, so if it's a small group on the 6th, we would do I would suggest meeting at 4:30, or 4 o'clock to do a quick meeting, to do interviews if it's a small group that put in. If it's a larger group, I'll make a suggestion to do a special meeting Wednesday the 7th, which would be a little bit longer, but we'd do like a work session type meeting where we would do, start at 4:30 and then try to get as many through as we could.
Okay.
that day. So,
Okay.
Does that make
sounds good.
sense?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
But, so my second point is just, can you talk a little bit about your thought process? I mean, I get it, and I also am having a little bit of turbulence in terms of like prohibiting anybody from running for it, and I get it in terms of the circumstances we're in, but just, can you talk a little bit about what you're thinking in terms of, I mean, I understand that we could potentially be tipping scales by making a selection of people. But it also feels like slightly strange to say certain people are exempt from
Right.
that opportunity.
So, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Oh, I think you'd be great.
Please, Ray, ask.
Duly noted, Mr. City Manager. Jai, why'd you have to answer a hard
I'm
question?
sorry, I just have to ask.
No, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think the process, because Lisa actually, she asked the same thing in leadership, because she was the council person in leadership today. And she asked the same question, and I think my retort to that was, my concern was, one, it would tip the scale to that. And I think it would do undue disadvantage for those that aren't on council, that are running, and I think we would get certainly a lot of frustration based upon that. The second component behind it is that finding people that don't want to run. This is a short interim period. This is not, I think we would be in trouble if we did a year or 2 years and we just were like, nobody else can put in or whatever. But this is a very short period, a short window, so I think we can get through that fairly quickly and have that without having too much. And then leave the race as fair as possible and let the people decide who they want to serve 4 years for that. And that's my thought. I don't know if anybody else wants to add.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. I think you're asking a good question, and I think it's something that council needs to feel comfortable with, in that I don't believe you can say this person cannot apply. But what I do think you can say is, theoretically, in agreement that appointing a current candidate does not serve the public well. And I think if all of you agree that if you do get current candidates as interim candidates also, that may be something that you can kind of walk into that process being on a common understanding and a common ground, if you will, as you approach an analysis of your interim candidates. But I think you're right. I don't think you can say so-and-so and so-and-so, you're not, you cannot apply.
Okay,
But
They can,
rather
yeah.
deal with it if they do.
Yep.
You know?
okay. Thanks.
Bruce and then Amber.
So I have another idea. I'm just wondering, I don't know, I know by law the seats have to be filled. The question would be, how much time do you legally have? Because it might literally behoove us. The election's only 2 months. It's the first Tuesday in November. It might behoove us, with 7 people, we're never gonna have a split vote. And it may behoove us to wait until November and appoint the 2 people that win those seats. Then we're whole. It gives them a 2-month jump on what we're doing. And, I mean, that makes sense to me too. I don't know if that's legal, but it sure seems like a much better way to go for me. I'm really struggling with bringing somebody in here for 4 months and then saying thank you, goodbye.
Go ahead, John.
There really isn't a set process for filling them, and no deadline for filling them. The only requirement is the council appoints the person to fill the vacancy. The pros to your thought process would be that they do come in, they get an extra couple of months to start up. The pros, I guess, of letting someone come in who's either been on council or is familiar with council, was on some joint powers board or something, they would bring something immediately to it. Plus also then those 2 wards that will have only 2 representatives wouldn't feel like they're being shortchanged instead of having 3 representatives. So that's probably the trade-off there.
Well, as a follow-up, I can buy that argument to a point, but I can tell you, being one of the representatives in Ward 1, I have never, ever voted, ever, one time, with just my ward in my mind, ever. I mean, we're elected by ward, but we vote for the entire city of Casper. At least I have. And I don't know if anybody's ever voted just for something in only their ward. I've never seen that happen, so I don't know that holds as much weight as maybe waiting, but I don't know, it's just another idea.
Steve and then Amber. Sorry, I forgot Steve was in the line.
First of all, I voted for no chickens, so I'm surprised you didn't bring that up.
I know.
Secondly, about precluding people, I feel like we ought to go ahead and preclude them based on your comment that we don't want to weigh it, because then if we turn around and allow them to apply and don't pick them, then everybody's out there going, oh, council doesn't like either one of the 2 candidates. So it's kind of one of those things, you're a no-win situation, so you're better off to exclude current candidates that will be on the general ballot and move on, is kind of my opinion of that, because and make the statement that we just are trying to be neutral for the election.
I think that's a fair point, Steve, that you made about if we don't pick them, then they feel like we're being exclusionary. So I think that's a good flip on that coin too.
Yeah.
Amber.
Thank you. I think I'd be comfortable with whichever of the kind of 2 recommendations on the table that legal counsel feels best about. I think with the first option that was presented, to me, to Jai's point, like the real distinction is because the primary has happened, the general has not. We're in like the weirdest, most difficult period. If this was a month before the primary, I would say
100%.
go ahead. It doesn't, candidacy or potential candidacy status doesn't matter, but being that the primary has happened, I think we have to be very careful about it.
Yeah, I think we're like in the absolute
Yeah.
vacuum
Mhm.
that we could be in.
Yep.
For this to happen, and so I think that if legal counsel, if Sean agrees with and suggests that we should fill it now and then go through, is that your suggestion, John?
Again, there's no set process. I think that's the way I was originally thinking, but again, it is your decision, and I don't want to enter on that.
Okay.
As a follow-up to that, how long of a time period did we have Jai, and how long of a time period 3.5 years ago did you take to appoint me back to council?
Fleur, do you know the timetable for them, just off the top of your head?
If I remember to council, I don't remember the timetable it took, like the application process, or How long?
Just the whole process, how long?
It was almost 2 months before we brought her in. By the
Yeah,
time
it
we
was several
got
months.
applications, reviewed them all, then interviewed, it was at least a couple months, so.
My only clarification behind that would be is that was for one seat, and we're talking about 2 seats. And so, I mean,
2 seats is better.
Yeah.
We still have an opportunity to not have a split vote, whereas with 1 seat, you've got that problem. So with 7 people on council, you can't have a split vote as long as people show up. So it's actually, we're in a better situation, but I'm gonna keep pushing and advocating to just appoint in November. If it's up to me, it just makes more sense. And it's gonna be quicker, it's gonna be much quicker than the last process we went through to bring her in. And I think it just sets up council way better, personally.
yeah.
If we do that, do we still have to go through the application process, or can we just say that we're automatically appointing the people that win that election?
I think we're in safe ground unless John wants to stand up and tell me no, give me that lawyer look. I think we're on safe ground to say whoever would get the most votes in the primary would just fill that seat. John? He gave me the heads up.
In the
He said
general,
yes.
in the general.
In the
yeah.
general.
In the
As long as you
general.
all do that, you don't have to follow the mayor.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Kyle and Steve.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I don't have an incredibly strong preference between the two, but I do like Councilman Nell's point. When I first got elected to council, you get a couple months to get used to it, and then we jump right into budget. And so I like giving them a couple extra months to get the lay of the land so that they can have a more serious conversation when we get to the budget. So I think I prefer that. I mean, it's only 3 or 4 regular meetings with 7 of us, so.
Steve.
The one thing I was gonna ask, and this would probably be for our attorney, but right now, we have to have 5 affirmative votes, which was basically 1 more than.
Right.
So can we suspend rules to where that would go to 4 until we get the other 2 members?
No, the state statute mandates that for ordinances particularly,
Okay.
that we have to have the 5.
Okay.
5 or just a quorum?
The 5,
That's a
get an
quorum.
ordinance passed.
Well, if you have 7, a quorum will be 4.
Well, and the question is though, if we have a couple of you have conflicts, and then we're down, and then you have a split vote of any sort, or somebody else is absent, then you don't have enough folks to fill that.
And I think that was my only concern of why I wanted to push that through, was just because of, and especially with COVID, probably gonna ramp up again in the fall, But I'm comfortable with whatever the council wants to do. I wanted to give the presentation of what was recommended. And certainly we'll go with, if council's more comfortable with going with 7 until after the primary or after the general, I'm happy to do that as well. Yeah.
If you look ahead at our agendas, I think we'd be safe. Unless something got thrown in on us that, which is always a possibility. I think it'd be safe, and I think as long as we have a consensus among the remaining council members to be here when we need to be here, I think we'd be safe doing it that. I just can't get over the thought of bringing somebody in for just a couple months and.
You still wanted to say something, Amber?
I do 2 things now. So first point is that we are making an assumption that the candidates would accept an appointment early, which we actually don't know if they would or not, so that could be problematic. And second, I would be concerned about our ability to move ordinances if we, in that period with 7 people, I mean, we haven't had a vote that's been that close before, but could happen. So that makes me a little uncomfortable. Whether or not we have any business that's pressing in those couple of months, I don't know, but something can always come up. So I'm not sure. I could be convinced either way. Truthfully, I think there are merits to both solutions, but I also, what happens if somebody wins the primary but does not want to start until January, or the general, and then doesn't want to start until January, and then we have a vacancy still.
Bruce?
That'd be hard for me to believe, I think. If somebody ran that they wouldn't take the appointment 2 months early, but I guess we could reach out to them. But I will also say, just in final, for me, I don't care which way we go. I just wanted to throw another idea out there. This seemed would be better for the council as a whole. That's all.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. Councilwoman Pollack brought up my point. We would just need to, if we go down that path, I'd want to make sure to reach out to the candidates and make sure they're prepared to accept that appointment if they were to win.
So I guess we'll just do it the old Democratic way. Because I think we've heard from all sides. So we'll just go with whatever majority wants.
Wait,
So,
one
hold on a
second, let me think.
There's 8 of us. This could be a problem. Right.
Okay, I'm ready.
You're like, okay,
Deep
I know what I
breath.
got.
Deep breath.
Okay, so I guess if you're in favor of going through the application process, having that taken care of, go ahead and do a thumbs up if you'd like to. Okay. All right.
Perfect, that's 4 and 4.
No, it fails because of it. Yeah. Okay. So what we'll do then is we'll go through, we'll reach out, I think, do our due diligence, reach out to the candidates.
Unless there are 4 that wouldn't support it.
All of them.
I mean, you may want to ask the question, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. This is why I have you here. So those in favor of go ahead and just giving the offer to the primary candidates if they win in November.
Oh my gosh, no, I want to.
You're the swing vote.
I'm the swing. I'm gonna go with the original idea.
You want
I'm gonna
the
thumbs
application
down this.
process?
Yeah.
Application process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then that's the way it'll have to be, because that's 5.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Application.
Flora will do the application
Toughest
process.
decision we made so far.
That's the closest vote I've ever
I was not
seen.
prepared for this level of
Sorry,
stress tonight, thank you so much.
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys debating it. I appreciate bringing ideas on, and this is what I appreciate about this council. I mean, it's really good to have this conversation with you guys. So, and it will all turn out all right. I know it will. Pretty much like-
That's okay. Oh, that's okay. You gotta cut the way it should.
Okay, moving along, we're a little bit behind. We'll go ahead and move on to the indoor sports complex. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everybody. As you have probably already noted, we've got representatives of our non-profit development team here tonight to help walk us through the conversation that you see represented on this screen here. 2 major elements of the topic pertaining to the indoor sports complex that I'd like you to be thinking about as we go through this. First of all, the possibility of putting this particular development on Ford Wyoming Center property is what you're considering this evening, and you've got a pretty good view there of how that could look. That would be done by virtue of a lease agreement, and tonight we want you to be able to hear some of those major tenets of what that agreement involves. Secondly, however, and I'm speaking obviously in very broad strokes, we want you to be real familiar with respect to the scope that this project entails. Obviously you can see here that with regard to its full build out, we're potentially talking about 15 acres, 14 and a half acres of land adjacent to the Ford Wyoming Center that the city would be offering as a partnership with respect to this development. And so the scope is important for you to understand. The impact, as it were, economically and particularly operationally, is something you should be aware of as well. So that's really a broad agenda for tonight's discussion, and we're hoping that you'll feel comfortable asking questions and diving in a little deep on this. And then what my hope would be, if indeed you're comfortable with the idea being proposed, which we certainly hope you are, we would take a formal lease agreement forward to the floor for you to consider on a formal basis and move forward with the development. So without further ado then, if I could turn the time over to our team to walk us through the scope and go through the lease agreement as well. We'll see what questions you have.
Sounds good. All right, everybody, I'm Jessica Hastings. I'm presenting on behalf of the Wild Complex, this youth sports complex. Since we presented last time and brought this to council last, we have created the nonprofit Wild Complex. We have applied for the 501c3 status, but it's currently pending. We've contracted State Line Number 7 Architecture as our design team, and we've engaged the Sports Facilities Companies, SFC, as our field experts in design, development, and construction. So we're making leaps and bounds on this project. SFC being our field experts, one of their concepts that they bring forward is this concept to concrete. So early concept development, feasibility, financial forecasting, and funding and partnership development is currently in the stage that we're in. And I want to touch a little bit on this concept idea because originally this was a 2-court facility, spring structure, and now we're looking at potentially a $30 million project. So talk about increasing the project. Some of the reasons being why we have increased this project is, one is many of you probably have kids in this room. You've noticed that you need court space, you need a facility. So obviously kids and providing this to the community is one driver for increasing the volume and the size of this project. 2 is that we have a really unique opportunity on our hands with this project because within this region, we do not have a sports complex of this size and stature to bring in national and regional opportunities to this area. So we have the opportunity to be the sports complex in this region, which would be a really great opportunity for Casper and for the region community itself. So with that being said, to get out of this box here, what we need to do is we need a land lease approval and we need city support. Oops. So with that, our design of our project with concept has evolved. We have what we have in design with State Line is a 2-wing structure where one wing is going to be 6 courts, 6 permanent basketball courts. The other wing is going to be turf with the option to overlay 4 additional basketball courts on top of it. Altogether, that's going to be 10 basketball courts, 20 basketball courts, 4 tournaments, which brings us into a different bracket of opportunities nationally and regionally. That the opportunities for programming within this facility, basketball, volleyball, soccer, mat sports, dance, cheer, pickleball, baseball, softball, sports performance, local activities, events, trade shows, and of course, events in support of the Ford Wyoming Center. 14.5 acres is a lot. Again, this project keeps evolving. 14.5 acres is a lot larger than what we originally had intended, but this building here, the proposed site is going to be 131,000 square feet, and one of the reasons why we increased the size of this project originally was the increased court space and having 10 courts with an option to potentially partner with the event center brings us again to a 12-court minimum and additional square footage that gets us to again another bracket in potential opportunities for bringing opportunities to Casper. So we have this wing over here on this right side. That's going to be where our basketball courts are, and then we have our turf and additional court options over here on the left. And additionally, we do want to have parking. We think that for our facility it's going to be optimal to have parking within our ground lease, but that's under the impression that we do want to have shared parking and have this be utilized for both entities as needed per events, depending on what those sizes and parameters include. Along those lines, one of the main goals, we realize that we are kind of encroaching upon what the event center already has in place. So that being said, one of our main goals is we just want to make sure that we have synergy with the event center and our approach in doing so, making sure that this building that we bring in is complementary to what's already existing. And again, we want it to be a mutually beneficial opportunity for both entities. But we do realize that in doing that, there are 2 components that we do want to make sure that we get on the same page with. One is obviously parking. So again, I cannot reiterate enough that we want and are in full support of shared parking. So we understand this is quite a bit of real estate, but having this be as much parking as possible to share. And then also our support in whether it's traffic studies or design, planning, whatever it might be, to have that mutual agreement and comfort in the parking layout is definitely something that we do want to promote. And as long as we're talking about parking, potentially grounds, 2 things that I do want to note as well is that we are going to be improving and do understand the expectation of bringing our lots and spaces up to city code standard of landscaping, paving, whatever that might be, and slapping a $30 million project on one of these lots. And then also bringing infrastructure up there. It's a great opportunity for future development, bringing utilities all the way up top to potentially expand development is a good catch as well. And then, so parking is one of our primary focuses with this. The other is just making sure that we have a good relationship with the event center, making sure that we're scheduling, coordinating, communicating, and that goes to the event center and the city as well, to make sure that we are having this facility is being communicated on all fronts to make sure it's beneficial and works for everybody. Impacts, this is just a small list of some of the impacts for the community. So we're going to be meeting the need of court and turf space for the community. We're going to be promoting youth sports, boosting mental and physical health within our community to kids and adults. We're going to be making a space available for the creation of a multi-million-dollar sports complex at no cost to the taxpayers. And we're going to be allowing regional tournaments and significant events hosted in Casper, increasing the number of visitors. So just a few of the long list of benefits. I'm going to touch minimally on this. We do have Visit Casper here if you guys have questions here at the end. But here are two examples. I know it's kind of small, but these are two examples of reports that Visit Casper ran. Both of them are 3-day volleyball tournaments with 3,000 attendees. And the direct spending is based on lodging, transportation, food and beverage, retail, recreation, space rental, business services. Each event for the 3 days is looking at about $1.4 million in direct spending. Now this is more of an aggressive impact that we have seen, looking at about $180 per person in direct spending per day. And then we have SFC, again, they're experts in this as well, in addition to Visit Casper, but they're looking at more of a regional, and some of their scales are a little bit different as far as how they're assessing these numbers. But here's just a brief example, years 1 through 10, 11 through 20, that we still do have an increase in economic impact and climb. That's going to increase in activities as we become more nationally recognized. And these, again, numbers are based on $120 in direct spending per day to $150. We do understand the variance in our numbers in Visit Casper, but yes, Visit Casper's boots on the ground in town numbers versus regional, so that's where some of that influx comes from. And one thing that I'm slowly going to end on is in a lot of these facilities, SFC has been building these across the country left and right. And what they are seeing predominantly is this, what they call a halo effect. So they are dropping a sports complex and they are seeing development just increase and spread all around it. It's kind of the anchor in a lot of these communities. And so what I want to point out, I have 3 examples here. One is Sand Mountain Park. This was finished in 2021. Since 2021, they've had $120 million in economic impact. And they've added 3 new hotels, restaurants, and retail in the developing area. That's one example. Our second example is Rocky Mountain Event Center in North Carolina. They've been open since 2018, $20 million in economic impact, and I geek out over this one. But prior to opening, they had 40% occupancy in their downtown. Since opening, they're now at 100% occupancy. And they've had 2 new hotels, at least Spearhead, in this developing area. The last one is Cedar Point Sports Center in Sandusky, Ohio. They've been open since 2020. They've had $22 million in economic impact, and they've had a really great opportunity of, they're starting a development of mixed use and $100 million put into that. So here's some good opportunities of potential and where we're at with this project. And so if you guys have any questions, I have some insightful people here to help me assist if you have anything.
Bruce.
Couple of questions. First off, a comment. I think your economic impact numbers are extremely conservative, because I know that just the state tournament alone that comes to Casper brings almost $14 million. So I think you're very conservative, so that's great. When you're on the conservative side, I like it because I think we can honestly expect more. But there's some questions as far as, for me, funding. Who owns the building when it's done? Is it turned over to the city? Are we maintaining it? You know, There's 3 for you right there.
Yes, please. My name's Tasma, I know most of you, but in regards to the funding, the plan is to generate private donations. That's why we are a 501c3. Between 80 and 90% of our funding will hopefully come from private donations. We're already working on that. We will be trying to look at if there's any benefit with the economic development to see if there's some government dollars. We will not be asking the city of Casper for any government dollars. We're asking for the land. The building will be owned by the nonprofit, and the operations will be run by the nonprofit, but the plan is to delegate those to a management company, which has yet to be decided. We first need to make sure we can build it.
So as a follow-up, then the city would never be on the hook for maintenance or anything like that concerning the building and the property that you're leasing?
The draft of the lease that is currently proposed is we are responsible for all of the maintenance, and in fact are participating in a potential restoration of parking or things like that. So there is no responsibility from the city for the maintenance of the building.
And just so you know, I did my homework and I did read the lease and I knew that to be true. I wanted it out publicly so that the taxpayers can't say they're gonna hook us sooner or later. This is 100% funded by your organization. My only question would be for the city manager at this point. Do they have to have a certain amount of required funding before we sign a lease on this size of land so that this thing isn't in perpetuation, if you will?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, there certainly are concerns that our two parties have discussed as it relates to the feasibility of the project, particularly if the donor stream doesn't come through as much as the developers would hope. There's a lot of detail in the lease that would cover that, and I'd be happy to defer to you or Mr. Henley to cover that more, but would you like to take a shot at that?
Is that okay?
That's all right.
The lease anticipates that the lease will begin, but we are not allowed to commence construction until we have demonstrated all of the funding is in place, either through donors or through bank financing. And there's a window in which we will have to accomplish that start of construction.
Amber and then Lisa.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question of Brad, if that's okay. I am interested to hear from your standpoint. I know you've been working with these folks and having discussions. Where do you see the synergies with the Fort Wyoming Center and how that looks for your facility?
So, Mr. Mayor, City Council, first off, OVG does support this project 100%. We feel it is needed in this community. The strategic venue studies that you saw a few weeks ago, outlined that we need banquet conference space, but we also need to go after youth sports. That's where, we can grow from a state, regional, and even national level, that we don't have facilities right now. So we do support the project 100%. Obviously, the parking is something that needs to be worked through. We have solutions that we're working on, and Mr. City Manager has put out those solutions, and we're all, looking at that. As far as growth and impact and synergy and working together, yeah, that needs to be addressed to figure out. Obviously, there are certain events that we have at the Fort Wyoming Center that are very, very important that we'll need to make sure we're working with the complex to make sure it happens. But I think it's about being proactive and collaborative at the very get-go to make sure that all of those questions are answered and ready to go before, we open and operate in a joint capacity.
Thank you.
Deep Cap, or Lisa.
Looks like Luke might have an answer to my question as well.
Oh,
if you
yeah,
could-
Luke, did you have something?
I
Sorry.
was just gonna add something specific. Luke with Visit Casper, thank you. Really quick specific on that. The Fort Wyoming Center is audience-based, whereas this facility would be competition-based. So a totally different style of event that is separate in terms of how they would house it, how they would operate, they would run that. And it allows us to have both, whereas right now we have one.
Thanks, Luke. Lisa.
I'm not exactly sure who this question is, so I'm gonna target you.
Sure.
Specifically, I know that you're you kind of just threw out different sports that could be there, but I'm guessing you guys have an idea of which sports you're gonna target first?
Yes, so our idea is, and the main spearhead for this project was originally volleyball and basketball. So that is our, kind of at the forefront, but we did realize, hey, there's a huge need for turf. So the turf will be there seasonally, and we will be able to add, the court space on top of that. But I don't see that any of these opportunities here listed are gonna be, in the shadows. I think with the operational hours of this facility, that throughout the day, that there will be access to all of these activities and more once we really dive into the opportunities and need that Casper has that may even beyond just sports and events.
Steve Kathy.
Two things about council money. In the parking agreements, do you foresee us having to have some money for repaving and for that? And along with that, I know we have talked about moving to the east, just south of that little building up there, to put another area for CNFR. Now, I would assume that's all gonna be on council as well. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, thank you for that question. If I could turn back to that exhibit that we, the original exhibit of the layout there. Yeah, thank you, perfect.
And your finger was right where I was talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
I know
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, there's a couple things you should be aware of. First of all, we anticipated and staff recommended that indeed in the very near future, council would need to invest in your parking space up there, regardless of whether or not this project comes to pass. Secondly, we have been working on a solution that is an earthen solution, if you will, to accommodate primarily CNFR contestants to the east of the entire complex. You had your finger on it earlier, Jeff. Yep, that's it.
That's where I was talking about.
Right there, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And we learned this season that improvements in that area would be critical because the sand is very, very deep there, and we were hanging up a lot of our contestants' trailers and so on as we were trying to, accommodate them and so forth. And so in the off season, we're going to be working that area so that hopefully before the next CNFR, which obviously would be in June, we'll have that more complete and more able to accommodate our contestants. But the other thing I wanted to mention also, to sort of put by way of bug in the council's ear, is that that space that is in between the earthen solution and where the building is going to go, which we know as the driving range right there. I would suggest that upon the full build out of this facility, which could be in 18 months to 2 years, I assume, council may want to consider that space in a different way. And so we have given the school district a very tentative preliminary heads up that they may want to consider looking for other space to have that range facility located, because I would suggest that at some point in the future we may need to use that for just traditional parking instead of what it's being used for now. One more comment to add to your thought process here. If 1 cent 17 passes, you have money that would come forward in the form of asphalt parking lot type money to contribute to the issues we already have up there. And I would suggest that if we are aware of that and understand that, and if we can work really closely with the development team here, we should be able to deploy those funds in such a way that we can deal with some of our problems that we're facing currently and design all of this more holistically so that we can avoid future problems when this building is up and running and good things are happening in that space.
So to
Go ahead, Steve.
summarize what you just said, basically we're already working on the lot to the east.
Number one.
Okay.
Yep.
And that we would wind up using the money that from 1 cent 17 that we were going to use to redo the parking lots would go in collaboration with whatever they would bring in to where we would be at a net zero over what we have already had planned.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then the third point, Mr. Mayor, again, just in the spirit of summary, keep your eye on that, that driving range space, is my humble request.
Kyle?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank Carter for bringing up the driving range. That was one of my questions. I think if we move forward with this idea, it doesn't make sense to me to have that there, so I would like to see us have that future discussion. Going back to Brad, if I could, I was curious, Brad, if you can offer anything in the way of insight you think how the subsidy might be affected with the construction of this sports complex. Do you see it bringing opportunities to the event center that, the Fort Wyoming Center, I apologize, that don't currently exist? Are there events that are currently taking place at the event center that would be more properly suited for the indoor sports complex? Do you, could you give a little insight as far as that's concerned?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Gamma. Yeah, I think there's a real possibility of some more synergies, especially when it comes to activities like wrestling, where right now we're limited to 12 mats. Where if we can get another 12 to 24 mats in a complex such as this, we can now go out to bid regional and national level events. That's really kind of, we do 4 major wrestling tournaments a year in our building, so that would be something that would really help us to go out and work with Visit Casper and bring big time events to our city. As far as the subsidy goes, as long as we're coordinated on the activities and making sure that we are still being made whole, through our annual events, but also with those large events, those concerts, those special events, I do not see that as being an issue. We should be able to, in reality, reduce that subsidy by bringing more events that are coordinated together.
Thank you. Follow up if I may. Has there been any discussion about a steering committee or leader, like you talked about coordination, what would that look like formalized with the folks at the indoor sports complex?
Yeah, there's been preliminary discussions with McMurray companies and OVG, very preliminary, mostly just what's going on, what are we looking for in the future. I think there's an appetite from OVG to be part of the management of this facility. And, that's definitely, needs to be considered down the road. That coordination and partnership, however it exists, is going to be crucial to the success of both complexes.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Go ahead, Desma.
Mr. Mayor. The lease agreement at the back, a yet finalized paragraph, does require us to coordinate with the Fort Wyoming Center. The procedure for that is yet to be determined and hopefully not in the lease agreement, and something that can evolve as these relationships evolve, that there is that requirement that we work together, that we work with them.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Desma. Jai?
Thanks. Just a quick question too, in the spirit of kind of collaboration. I'm also curious just in terms of layout, like, this is minor, but like, what do you envision in terms of flow between the facilities? I mean, we've spoken about parking, but I imagine, if there are, concurrent events, like, have you thought about like walking paths, or I don't know how that works, but I'm just curious about the longer term vision.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Sutherland, we have a parking vice president in OVG who will be here on September 8th to look at how our system works.
Okay.
And I think this will be part of his, initial looking at how we ingress and egress out of that building. So a very good question, and we are on top of that because we know we have traffic flow problems right now. So those do need to be addressed.
Thanks, Brad. Other questions? Bruce?
I do. One of the things you brought up, I think Luke did, is the event center is more geared for spectating. This will be geared more towards participation. Will there be seating for spectators at those events in that building, or is it just strictly for participants only?
We'll have like tilt and roll bleachers, similar to if your kid's playing sports and you go to the rec center and they've got the bleachers on the side. We're going to have sort of an amped up, a little bit better version of that. But it is truly, other than, parents and close family members stuff, it's for the kids that are participating.
Well, just for the record, as a follow-up, I love it. I hope you could find the funding. This would be so tremendous for our community. I truly hope that you find your way.
I would also say, and I'm Tyler Holthouse, the McMurray Foundation, which I'm on the McMurray Foundation, is very interested in supporting this in a major way, assuming we can get it through this next step. So that shouldn't, I don't think, be an issue, knock on wood.
So my only statement would be, I spent many years down in Windsor during basketball tournaments, and this is just basketball, but they have a pretty good basketball program or courts down there. They have about 6 basketball courts, and it is utilized. This is a game changer for, I think, for the city of Casper, because if you see what happened to Windsor, that's grown around that area, around that sports complex. There's Integrity Sports, and then there's Power to Play in that area, and the growth that's happened in and around Windsor, around those sports complexes. So I can vouch for that, and it's the economic impact to Casper. It's going to completely change with this, and this is an area that this is growing. We talked about these national tournaments, and I spent a lot of time traveling doing national tournaments with my son and for basketball, and this is a game changer for Casper. And so I'm 100% behind this. I think it's a fantastic idea, and we always talk about innovating, about economic development and innovation. This is it, and we have a group that's here that wants to put their money where their mouth is and put the work in. This is it. This is what we should be doing here in the state of Wyoming. Bruce.
We also had forethought because we just rezoned that property right across
That's
the
right.
street.
Anything else? Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You need direction? Direction requested?
What do you need from us?
Mr. Mayor, just a couple really quick details about the lease. Remember, we're going to bring the lease forward, hopefully here in the next couple business meetings of yours to take that final step as it relates to getting this started. That lease proposes a 99-year relationship with this development. And it's a very nominal rate, if you will, at about $1,200 a year. And so that's the way the lease is put together right now. There are still a few details that we are still working out with the development team. But nonetheless, we should be ready here in the next, I'm going to say 2 to 3 weeks to bring that forward. And so my request would be, hopefully we can get your direction to keep moving forward, but secondly, keep reading through that material and bring forward your questions if you have any between now and that time. We'll see what we can do to get you helped out through that process.
Council's obviously comfortable with Carter moving forward.
Question, please.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Why would it be $1,200 a year as opposed to $1? Where did that number come from? And I'm just curious.
$100 a month.
Yeah, why?
Mr. Mayor, Council, you certainly have the authority to set whatever rate you want. Certainly the benchmark is really that it be nominal at least. And so if your view of nominal should be less than that, I'm sure that'll bring great relief to the development team.
Well, my thinking is, that'll go a long way into paying their utilities, and I mean, they're about to invest $30 million into our community and bring us millions of dollars. $1 seems more appropriate to me. I don't know that $1,199 is going to hurt the city, but it would certainly help them as a show of good faith from the city of Casper and its residents, I would think.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to take whatever direction council would like.
Is council okay with the $1,200 a year for the lease negotiation, or as a statement of good faith, we would do $1?
It matters not to me.
Yep.
For the folks at the negotiating table,
You guys-
select something between $1 and $1,200.
There you go.
I agree.
Is that okay with council?
Yeah. all good.
Play hardball, Carter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
$12. I want $12, Carter.
$50 a month.
$1 a month, there you go.
That seems more better to me.
Average.
One other consideration. I appreciate Tasma suggesting that she doesn't want the details of the relationship to be too nailed down in the lease, and I agree with that completely. But I do want to make sure that we are attending to the necessities of that relationship on our side. Over the course of 99 years, obviously leadership is going to change several times, and while it might be collaborative now, we can't ensure that forever in perpetuity. And so however that looks, without being overly burdensome or restrictive, and allowing opportunity for the relationship to evolve as the facilities evolve, I think is fine. But making sure that there is some opportunity to address that should the need arise. Helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good.
Yes.
I didn't notice anything in there, but let's say that we have an event that, well, I'll just bring it up, CNFR. If we wanted to expand, say, from just the event center to free up some of the concourse space, and then would it be a working agreement then to swap rentals with this complex to put all of those trade show items, so to speak, in the complex, and those would be basically on an as needed basis, to where CNFR doesn't wind up losing the revenue and things? So those are kind of the working arrangements we're talking about?
Yes. We've discussed CNFR quite heavily, and we have discussed internally that almost would be a black opportunity for us. Knowing that CNFR is the event center, is one of their biggest revenue activities and events. We want to, again, promote the synergy and have our facility be backup and complementary. So yes, we could have CNFR over in Fort Wyoming Center, and then do trade shows here in ours. And that goes for everything. Maybe that's for sports, high school sports. We have the finals over here, and we can support as practice or whatever it might be. So we do have full intentions of supporting and being backup in ways that would promote their activities, absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you. Anything else? Anybody? Okay.
No.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
All right, moving on. Advanced Casper. Well, I'm going to take a couple seconds here to let everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, you can have your seat back over here. Chief Black, you can move back into the corner.
Is your sense of order out of alignment? Nobody's where they're supposed to be. I can't think.
Does anybody here watch or remember Monk?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, he would be doing, yeah, you need to move over here.
You ready to move forward?
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll move on to Advanced Casper. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Justin is here tonight with one of his board members to discuss with us the things that have been happening over there at Advanced Casper, some of the exciting stuff he's got going on, as well as cover some possibilities with respect to entering into an agreement with Advanced Casper et al. Concerning grant leveraging opportunities and outsourcing that effort along the lines of what we've talked about during the budget process specifically, wherein council suggested our getting engaged in grant leveraging opportunities internally, possibly. So this may be a good way to sort of give us an intermediate solution until we get to that point, if council so chooses. So without further ado, if I may, Mr. Vice Mayor, turn the time over to Justin and and his esteemed colleagues.
Thank you, City Manager, Mr. Vice Mayor, Council, thanks for giving me the time, and Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank everybody. There's nothing like an election cycle to make me appreciate all the stuff that you guys do for our community and the sacrifices and the commitment that you make, so thank you for that. I have just 2 asks today, a very brief overview of some deals that we have here in Casper, and then an invitation. So Carter was alluding to a contract that the city used to be a part of with a company called Sustainable Strategies. They're a Washington DC firm. In the past, we have sent a delegation of the mayor, the commission to DC to meet with the heads of EDA, the heads of these decision makers that do these grants. We have that contract with Sustainable Strategies. Currently, we have the Town of Mills, Natrota County is a participant, Visit Casper is a participant, Advanced Casper is a participant, and we're looking to the city of Casper to participate in that as well. There is in a memo that I sent out earlier, there is some stuff that had been outlined earlier by Sustainable Strategies as opportunities that are out there for us to go after. There's a couple things I'd like to just point out in that, and one of which is that the Congresswoman Cheney had expressed an interest in doing earmarks, which we have not had a federal delegation do that in the past. We would not have known about that, but Sustainable Strategies arranged the opportunity to then speak to the Congresswoman about bringing some of those dollars back, specifically for the health department for the county. So that's one of the things that they bring to the table. Now, they aren't going to pick up and write the entire grant. That's just not how their process works. Plus, they are covering a number of different entities here. We, as Advanced Casper, would be giving up allocated spots for grants on our position to the city to bring that partnership in. I think that the synergy, again, that what was being discussed earlier, fits into that. We want to maintain that with our community members. So there will still be grant writing. So from our perspective, we wrote one grant from Advanced Casper to the EDA for the Office of Innovation, and was awarded the only grant of its kind to be awarded to Wyoming, and we created a position of an equity analyst on that. Now, we wrote that grant. We had the position, we knew what we wanted. They helped us guide it, edit it, word it to where the audience that it was going to be in front of, it was much more effective. And so, to be candid, that is really what they bring to the table. It's my opinion, and our opinion as a board, that they increase the probability of those grants being awarded to our community. Now, with current federal legislation and new passing of all the new bills and dollars, there is no other time in the world that there's been more money out there available, and this is the process in which we as a community can access that. Politics aside, right or wrong, it's going to be there. Who's going to be the most responsible in spending that? So the timing for that would be, appears to be just take advantage of this while we can. And again, the city staff, people will still have to do the grant writing part, but again, they'll steer the content and put it in front of the decision makers who they already have relationships with and the network. I would also suggest that we re-engage with sending a delegation to DC to engage with those decision makers personally, because in Wyoming we do things way better in a personal level than we do over a Zoom or an email. So I would suggest that as well. I think that's how we like to do business, and again, having those personal relationships and contacts back in Washington DC could be advantageous to us. And that is really the Sustainable Strategies wrap up. I can just go through and then wait for questions at the very end and just move on with your permission, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, that sounds great.
The items on the desk is the second ask. This is an organization called Livability. They're a marketing institution. They develop these publications, the magazines that you see. They publish those yearly. That is meant to tell the story of your community. They also obviously have digital content as well that they can continually promote and continually put out there. So we've engaged with Livability to check the box that Advanced Casper has had of promoting our community specifically outside of the state of Wyoming. So this is for Casper area. It provides a number of different opportunities, like the sports utility or facility that was just proposed earlier. Being a father of a daughter who played basketball and seeing Mr. Mayor at the number of those same facilities, what a phenomenal opportunity for a community, and also a phenomenal opportunity to market said community in this platform that would be reaching outside of our state. Advanced Casper has gone into this agreement to where we feel it imperative that the right community members and partners participate in this, and we are willing to put dollars in match with those entities in order to make this right. So to make it a very robust, thick magazine, not a few pages. It could be word. So anybody that participates in it, you'll have a stack of these at your business. You'll have a stack here at the city. You'll have a stack at Visit Casper or Advanced Casper. Use them as recruitment. Use them as mailing out in a recruitment package. Anybody that inquires about our community would get a copy of this. And we promote the things that we've already worked on. Choose CPR, which is our digital identity as far as the community goes, connecting them with other community members. Tourism with Visit Casper, who is an integral partner in this process as well. So the other part, for instance, like telling our story is like driven content in that for the police station, the brand new police station that our community is going to build, and we are demonstrating our support of the police and law and order. That content there in a magazine like that tells a story about our community so that less people have their own preconceived notion of how we do conduct business here. Like, we support our police. We are a growing community. That complex would be another obvious great direction in which our community goes. So it can be used both as like a recruitment. So if you look at it as a relocation packet with a business content to it, I think is a more accurate way of looking at it. So instead of, the chamber, here's all that great stuff about it. Of course, we need stuff for our ski hills, our trail system, our lake system, or the event center, all the great livability components that we have as a community. But we also want to put that business spin on there too, for recruitment for police, or recruitment for the hospital, or recruitment for the city, for that matter, bringing like-minded people into our community. So that are the two asks. The first ask, the commitment would be on the livability. The commitment from the city would be $10,000. Each partner pays $10,000 to be a part of sustainable strategies. The content of this magazine and the participation is would be up to the city. Again, we'll have some dollars that we can match to help facilitate that, whatever that content may look like at the city's discretion.
Amber.
Several questions, but I want to start, I'll go backwards. So in the livability side of things, you're suggesting the city contribute a certain amount of money to essentially buy a certain amount of space in here to talk about city things that we would want to promote, or like
Yes.
would we essentially be reserving X number of pages for city content?
So the city content, the livability component of it is we're not paying to do an article about, let me back up. Yes and no, right? So if you want to do an article that addresses the Fort Williams Center in Hovedal, there could be a direction there as you could control that content. But just point out those assets, unless it is something that's specific to like a recruitment or a message that you would like to get across as a city, I would not suggest it be paid content. Like you don't need an 8-page article on, you know, how wonderful Ogadon is. Or, does that make sense? So for instance, if the police department or the fire department, who are in the past have always been in recruitment and trying to fill up positions, they could use this, or the hospital banner uses it could use it for recruiting docs or nurses or staff. Then if you want to do an 8-page content of, hey, this is what we're doing as a facility or an organization, this is the direction that we're going, with that in mind, and that would be a paid content article.
Go ahead.
Answer your question.
Follow up, a little bit. So if we're not paying for content, are we paying for ads? What are we paying for? If we give you $10,000 and it gets matched, what do we buy?
Well, there's a variety of things that we could do. We could do an article on Hogan, the trails, river trail systems, just those directions. It could just be a banner. It could be open to hiring. It could be a page of things that we have available in Casper. There's literally 2 pages of different types of content that we could purchase. From $24,000, that would get you 11 pages of a story, narrated story specific to your business, to an 8-page for $12,000 down to $800 banner.
Lisa and then Kyle.
So will the chamber be involved with this? I've got a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, they are on the list for sure. Whether or not they vote to participate in it dollar-wise, they'll still have some kind of presence in it.
Well, I am very familiar how to put together these magazines, so who is going to be the one selling the ad space? Because you've got digital ad space, you've got mobile ad space, and you've got magazine ad space. And it doesn't necessarily all have to be the same.
Sure, yeah, the 2 pages of different
Right,
options,
so
yes.
you're giving a flat rate to the city, but in essence, that's not really true, because depending on how much ad space you sell, then the cost of the magazine would be significantly less with the ad space.
I think there's some confusion. Sustainable Strategies, the Washington DC firm, is the $10,000.
Right.
I have no ask for this of yet as to
Oh,
what the
I thought
content
you were
is.
asking for the city to contribute to pay for this.
So sustainability will be, to answer your question about who is organizing that and selling the ad space, sustainability is contacting all of our community members and talking about, hey, what's the community mean to you, getting the narrative and selling the spaces. And this is more of a heads up as to, they have Carter's number, and so they're gonna discuss it with Carter. Then that discussion, what I wanted to make clear is that Advanced Casper is here in support to whatever the content that the city feels is important to address in this publication or in the digital content, that we'd be there to help with offset that cost.
Okay, because I guess I was confused because he had 2 asks, but theoretically, it's just really one.
No.
Well, Sustainable Strategies is a DC firm that the ask is $10,000 to
Right.
join Mills, the county, Advanced Casper, Visit Casper.
Right, to help write the grants.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, where does this come through?
That's livability.
That sounds a lot alike.
Different company,
Yeah,
making a
this
very
is
different
a-
thing.
This is
Maybe
a separate marketing campaign and company that we are talking to about promoting our community. So Sustainable Strategies will help us write for grants.
Right.
This will help us market our community outside of the state of Wyoming.
Bruce.
Thank you. So just to be straightforward and honest, I like the sustainable strategies idea because there is a plethora of money out there, and if they can help us tap into it, I'm all about it. I think that's a great idea. I think you spend $10,000. I think you you have a potential of getting, over 1,000% of your money back. The livability, I'm not interested in it. I don't like it. I haven't picked up a magazine in 15 years. And stop it. I just picked up my first magazine in 15 years. Let me restate that. I think there's better ways to market our city than buying ad space in a magazine. That's just my opinion. I'm just one. But anyway, that's where I'm at with that. But the sustainable strategies, the amount of possibilities there with all of that federal money, I'm all about it.
And to be fair, thank you, and that publication is simply the tangible item that we could bring in. It comes out once a year. The majority of those dollars will be spent digitally.
Right, but just to be clear, and I'm on social media and some other platforms, I don't think I've ever seen another city be marketed to me. In fact, my wife and I are looking for vacation spots right now, and I'm having a hell of a time. Nothing ever pops up. You got to go get it, or go find it. So, just thought I'd throw that out there. Thank you.
Fair, no, thank you.
Sorry, Kyle, I got Bruce in front of you.
Go right on.
Go ahead, man.
Thank you, Mayor.
You did tell me to go, didn't you?
I did. No, it was my fault.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thanks, Justin, for the information. I guess to echo what Councilman Nell was saying, I do like the idea of pooling resources to get those grants, especially if we don't have an internal grant writing position for the city. I think for the interim, that's helpful because, like you said, $10,000 we could get $1 million in grants. I would also agree that I don't find this extremely compelling. So I was curious, what to you is the benefit of going this direction as opposed to what Visit Casper's already doing with their publication that they, their marketing booklet they do once a year. What do you see the added value of something like this over what they're doing currently?
Thank you for the question. It's more of a business content as opposed to a tourism content. And to be clear, tourism is the only organization that is effective in marketing our community and state outside of the state. And we want to mirror that, but with more of a business feel to it. So to both help with recruitment from outside of the state, to help get visibility, so they're viewed as being complementary to one another. And the content in that would drive them to, again, choose Casper, tourism, and that to get people to explore more. It's truly a marketing effort to get outside of our four borders.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I guess to that point, I guess I could be sold on this. I'm not familiar with it. I've never come across it myself. But I personally love, Visit Casper. They got that great Anthony Stango video, little 3-minute tourism video. Have you explored the idea of something like that for more business-minded marketing? You can do targeted advertising on YouTube and digitally and stuff. Again, to echo what Councilman Nell said, paper publications are not extremely compelling to me, and I don't know how effective they are in this day and age. So.
That's fair, and yes, we have and we've also contracted with TIA, who does a lot of the tourism. So where tourism would go, hey, here's 10 reasons to visit Casper, and they list all the wonderful amenities that we have. We would wait, and then we do our own publication of, hey, here's 5 reasons to move your business to Casper, and then we list, our favorable tax structure and all the population and things of that nature. So again, they're looked at as 2 components, and the digital side of that, not the magazine part, is where we could leverage that a little bit more with that messaging. So I would encourage you to get on livability.com and explore it a little bit. Absolutely fair question. It's just, again, it's been a mission of ours to market our community outside of the state, because I believe that growth is coming, whether we want to or not. And unless we control the messaging, or we at least tell our story as a community, then it's left up to the minds of whomever randomly found us, right? So as much content as we can provide to those so they can make a sound business decision and personal decision to move to a community, the better we're going to be off as a community.
Amber, then Lisa.
Justin, this, if I'm thinking about this correctly, it's really kind of a co-op publication. Like there will be multiple entities that are opting in to being included in this post. So really the question before us today is, do we as a city entity want to be in this publication? Because presumably this is an initiative of Vance Casper that is moving forward, right? You are finding the partners to execute this.
Correct.
So I think the question for us is, does the city want to have some sort of footprint within this magazine as an entity? Or, I mean, it is all about the city, but as an organization, do we want to have a presence in this magazine?
That's accurate, yes.
So I think that's a different question than the one we're asking
Yeah.
of you right now.
If I may, Mike Stepp, in case anybody doesn't know me. We're trying to present this to you as something that is moving forward, or we're trying to move forward to give you the heads up, and then you can determine what input you want to have into it, what cost you want to expend on it, what you determine is the ROI for that. But as a city council, but we really are looking for partners that are in the community, because otherwise it makes no sense. We have to draw people into it to have good content that will work, and so that's really what we're looking for. And then I agree with you, Bruce. I haven't looked at one of these magazines. They're in the backs of the seats of the airplane and everything, but what we're really looking for is a digital platform that we can do some of the things like Kyle mentioned that Visit Casper does. Obviously, they set the pace, and now we're trying to agree with them that that's a good tool, and then maybe we can develop that tool for ourselves as an economic unit. So, does that phrase it?
There's most certainly the livability content of it, which we would be nowhere without the assets of the city of Casper that you have. The other, so you present that of like, yeah, everybody, well, people like fly fishing, people like skiing, people like sports, people like being outdoors, all the great stuff that we all enjoy here as Wyomingites. But you layer on that, we have the largest medical facility in the state of Wyoming. You layer on that, we potentially have 100,000 square foot sports facility for your family. You layer on that, here's our school districts and our ratings of like what we really do. Layer on that, here are our demographics. This is our population, this is our median home price, this is our income. So that in this content, you both get that, holy smokes, I'd love to go live there and recreate, but how am I going to make a living, right? And this is how we're trying to address that on a layered process, not just a gimmicky, throw it out there.
Do you have a follow-up?
I think it could be considered a follow-up.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Sorry.
Something on the line. Based on what you're saying, I think for me, the clarification that you've given, it would make, if there are, as I know when you're dealing with publications, there is paid content, there are things that feel more like ads, there is a whole host of things, as you mentioned, there's a menu of options, right? I'm wondering if it would make sense, and the ROI on those types of things are very different, right? If we just want to be part of the digital edition, that's a different proposition than here, right? So I'm wondering if maybe you could provide that menu of options to our staff. So we have some marketing folks that are coming on board now, and perhaps we could vet some of the specifics of how we might participate in this with some staff people so that we can better wrap our head around what might make sense based on the marketing goals that we've established as an entity.
Fantastic suggestion that we just gave him Carter's name.
Great.
So, like, spread that, no, that, but more eyes on that and the more questions, better, the better, right? Just pick them apart, right?
Just take it and go. Good.
We want it to be an investment, for sure.
So I forgot about Jai a little while ago, so
Poor
I've
little Jai.
gotten 100 picking everybody, but go Jai and then Lisa, sorry.
Thank you. So I have questions about the magazine as well as sustainable strategies, but maybe I'll just ask the magazine questions if we can come back to the,
I'd
okay.
like to separate these two
Yeah,
issues.
yeah. So I think, one of the things that could be helpful, I think it maybe is starting to feel a little bit more specific. It was feeling a little abstract at first, and so now narrowing down to what the actual opportunities are. This is something that we could choose to be a part of. I think if it moves forward and the city is not part of it, that also feels weird. So understanding what the options are, and I think it could also be really helpful if there's data behind what these have contributed to in terms of outcomes for different communities. I think that could be really helpful, especially if that's connected to the different menu options. So I don't know if that's available from them, but that would be helpful.
I think their marketing people have that.
Yeah.
They presented us something.
Okay.
Yeah, so specific to, don't have anything specific to municipality, have, the Mayo uses the livability in Rochester. And they have data on the articles that they have written and then how they participate that I provided to Banner. So
Okay.
I'll ask if they have something along the lines for the same
I
kind
think
of
that would be
ROI
really
for a municipality.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, thank you. And then just to clarify, you said how, is this a one-time thing or is it some sort of relationship where it's updated?
So the digital is all year.
Okay.
And updated periodically. The publication is 1 year.
Okay.
And so you can change the content, right? So it's not the same old stuff that we see.
Okay, sorry, one other
No,
follow-up.
go ahead.
So, and am I correct that you already have the agreement with Livability? And is that for the period of 1 year?
We have it's without the participation of our key partners and businesses, then there really is no agreement. We've agreed to explore this opportunity.
Okay.
Is what we've done.
Okay.
And if we do, it would be a minimum for 2 years.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa.
The magazine just has got me. What? So, I have a lot of questions. What's the cost that you're initially anticipating for the city? Just say that the city's interested on teaming up with this magazine. What are you anticipating, ballpark of what you think that the city needs to pay?
Well, I wouldn't put a number on that. For instance, like pre-COVID, and again, to use the police as an example, and they wanted to use it as a recruitment, like the Rochester and the Mayo does. That, depending on what that would usually look like for them as a budget, we would be there to help match that. So it could be as little as $1,000 matched, but with us, or it could be as much as $5,000, depending on, again, after you guys vet livability with your staff and marketing, to be like, what kind of direction do we want to have? Besides just the content itself, because of course, all our assets will be in there, all the livability side of stuff.
What's your anticipated production? How many magazines are you anticipating on getting? Because this is where your cost is at.
Yes, and it's, so that's big, and the thickness of that is up to the amount of participation from the private sector. So they will come out in the beginning of each year. They'll come and start doing the photographs. It's all part of that. It's no additional cost. It's just all part of the initial rate sheets that they provide.
Kyle Ridgway wanted to say something.
Kyle Ridgway.
Another.
Kyle Ridgway, I'm also a board member of Advanced Casper. I sent Justin a text to ask if he needed any help on this, but I'm going to go ahead and volunteer myself anyway. The point that I would make is, you know, I've been on Advanced Casper's board for 2 years, and Justin and that board have worked really hard to try to create a brand around the city of Casper and the Toronto County area generally's business identity. And what I would do is I would suggest that you all sort of Google some phrases around Casper, as if you were somebody that wanted to move here, wanted to move your business here, wanted to hire somebody here, and see what you find. Because what you're going to find is a lot of Oil City articles about crime, frankly. I'm just telling you. And so part of this strategy is that Advanced Casper is trying to sell the parts of Casper that are positive for businesses that are moving here. Advanced Casper and Justin have done a great job of moving a lot of significant businesses, not just from around the country, but international ones that are coming here to invest, bring a lot of jobs. And so this is a strategy around that. So I would suggest you don't get so hung up on the magazine idea, because it's a multi-layered strategy with a lot of different options. And what Justin's really asking for is some buy-in from the city as a key partner to be part of that marketing strategy for the city of Casper in terms of its ability to sell itself for businesses and for people to move here. What Visit Casper is really good at is getting people to come here and leave. What we're trying to do is get people to come here and bring people with skills to the community. I'm a business owner here of a variety of different businesses, and I can tell you it's not the easiest thing to hire skilled labor here, especially on the technical side, you know. And so I think that it's something that, you know, I think you should think about a little bit more broadly and do some digging on what is the city of Casper's brand identity if you're a business owner looking at coming here, and what's out there as far as the city's online presence, and what are the things that we all should make sure as stakeholders we're selling, which are the positive aspects of living in this community, which is, you know, I lived in larger cities. I mean, it's 5 minutes to work, it's 5 minutes to the grocery store. People here are friendly, elected officials are accessible, it's safe. Those are the kind of things that you want to emphasize to somebody who wants to be here, in addition to a lot of the other cool projects and amenities that we have. So that's my 2 cents I'd share as an Advanced Casper board member, just to sort of broadening your horizon about what Justin's really pitching here.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks. Kyle will be my official spokesperson.
Bruce and then Amber.
Thank you. To me, it seems like we have the cart ahead of the horse. I think if you were to come to this council and say, I have 119 businesses that are going to participate, I think you're going to grab the city by the socks and we're going to roll with you. I think to come to us first before you have that, I think is where I'm struggling. Because I don't mind getting behind it if our businesses are about it, because we as a city council want our businesses to flourish. We want our city to grow. So if our businesses are behind it, it's going to be more likely that we will be behind the project. So to me, I think we're just a little early on this. I would like to see you come back to me and say, I got 116 businesses that are on board with this. We need the city to jump in. That would be, I'd be more likely to want to participate.
That's fair. And this is all beginning, so Commissioner No, yes, we have 2025 committed, but that would be a good, powerful list. And as they come in, there's the usual suspects of, Casper College needs to be involved, the Banner Health needs to be involved. And so again, we'll most certainly.
And do let me go on the record and say I appreciate all that Visit Casper does for the city. I appreciated all the work Brooke did. I appreciate all the work you guys do. And you're invaluable to us as a community. So it has nothing to do with you guys. And I don't think this is a bad project. I just think maybe we need to get some teeth in it first before the city can really jump behind it and just say, okay, let's throw some dollars at this, because it's not only going to help our existing businesses, it's going to help maybe attract some new ones.
That's the idea.
That's
Yeah,
the idea.
just a thought.
Yeah, we have to have those tools to do that. And
Right.
we have had success with some recruitment. That would be a good segue into just a brief update, but I'll continue with the questions.
I'm going to hold that question that Bruce brought up as part of when I bring up the 2 votes on that. So I want to hold that thought that you had, Bruce. So Amber.
Thanks. Thank you, Kyle, for the information that you provided to us. I think that that is related to one of our council goals. It was certainly a goal of mine when I came on council to develop a more compelling brand for the city of Casper, a consistent brand for the city of Casper, to be controlling and managing our message more effectively than we are, for the exact reason that Kyle's talking about. You know, if you Google it, right now we have no control over what's popping up. Tools like this give you control, or some amount of control. So it's much more than, do we have a paper thing? It's also like, do we have content that's living out there on the internet that people can find, and is it well done? Is it ranking high in SEO, so that those are things that pop up early? So it's more complicated than, you know, we have a tangible paper asset. So I do think we share a common goal with Advanced Casper, that we are trying to develop a brand and trying to market ourselves to citizens and to people who are not here. I'm not positioned to say if this, yes, is the perfect tool for it or not the perfect tool. I think that those are conversations that can happen. You know, the strategy can be shared with staff, and, you know, I'd love to be brought in more on the broader strategy, the multifacets of the strategy that you're talking about, because we've just recently created more positions within the city structure to deal with elements of this as well. So I think we are on the same page with this philosophically. It's just a matter of like, what's the mechanism and what's the strategy, and so I think we should keep talking about that. Good news tonight, this is information only, so we actually don't have to say yes or no we're participating in this, so we can let the details of it develop and emerge, and the more broad strategy come to us. But I think personally, from a conceptual standpoint, these two goals are aligned: Advanced Casper's goals and one of our council goals. So happy to keep developing a strategy in partnership with Advanced Casper and other partners in the city.
Vice Mayor.
Well, I think to take what Bruce said a step further, though, is that by not saying that we're behind it, somebody's got to step up to the plate first and say they're behind it. And I think it's important for us, if we do think that this is a road we might want to go down, then we should take a step forward in doing that. Because you may have businesses out there that are thinking about doing it, but it may have the opposite effect. Well, if the city's not behind it, why would I get behind it? So I think somebody's going to have to step forward and say, this is a great idea. And I think we certainly can step forward and say this is a great idea if we think it is, but we would want to make sure that we have plenty of businesses backing it before we take that step to commit to it. So.
Another question, and that's our goal, is to get private sector involved, and that's what drives it all.
So is council okay with a couple things maybe here? Because it sounds like we want to see some more businesses maybe on board with this before we kind of give that. Or one of the others too is to give, I heard Amber say, hey Carter, this is the staff. You guys look at this, you guys decide, then maybe bring it back to the council to say these are our ideas and this is how we can do it. Is that a possibility? Is council okay with that if we did give it to Carter and the staff to kind of maybe dig more deeper into it and then have a conversation with us about this specifically? Yeah,
yes, absolutely. And I do appreciate, that's what I love about this council, because Steve said it more eloquently, and he's right. Somebody's got to jump on this thing if it's going to go. And I'm not opposed to doing that, but I'd sure like to have information requested. I'd like to have more information and find out what other businesses may or may not be on the fence with this, and see if we can get some kind of a partnership with our business community to maybe put some information like this out there. Because it's like, Justin? Kyle, sorry.
Close.
Sorry, Kyle.
Justin, Kyle.
Sorry, Kyle. It's like Kyle said, if you Google us, right now it may not be the prettiest picture. So if we can get some other stuff out there, it might be advantageous. Even if we grab one business out of all of this, one business comes here and creates jobs for our people, and a tax-paying business, it's a win, right? So I'd sure like to see our staff maybe explore this a little better and come back with a little more information for us if possible.
No problem.
Okay. Now, as far as the sustainable strategies, Carter, do you want to maybe? What's that?
I forgot we had a whole nother part.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a question first?
I have. Well, if Carter's going to give us an entree.
It's about the sustainable strategies. Okay. Go ahead, Carter. Go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. So the sustainable strategies piece. I appreciate what you're saying, Justin, about the expectation that we should have as we go into this potential relationship. In that, it is fair to assume that they won't replace a grant writing office, as it were. And so the reality is the amount of dollars that we are able to, cast a net out there and bring back to the community is contingent upon the amount of time that staff would be able to put together in order to cast that net, whether it's in partnership with sustainability strategies or not, sustainable strategies or not. Because indeed, they really can't replace the local knowledge that we would need to, put on paper at least the beginning parts, and hopefully get some real substantive help from our partners with this team. So I think we do need to be realistic about what it is that we would expect out of this relationship. However, I also know that, to have a fighting chance for a lot of those dollars, particularly if our legislative team is not wild about earmarks, which I'm not getting that memo that they are, we're going to have to be really pragmatic and aggressive. And yeah, I bet it does take face-to-face visits and so on. So my proposal would be, if you do have that interest, be aware of its limitations, but also understand it has to be more than just 1 year type relationship. And so I think we have to consider it at least on a 2-year basis, because these cycles take a while, and sometimes you have to do it twice. In one case, we did it 6 times, and we still weren't successful, with one of our programs. We really should have been successful. So I think the question really is not a $10,000 ask, but probably more of a $20,000 ask over a couple year period, or longer, depending on what you want that pilot to extend, if you will, over time. So that would be the kind of the context that I would help frame this conversation under.
Good, Jai.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and it's exactly one of the questions I was going to ask, which is, it sounds like strategically this opens the door to understanding where we might be positioned best to pursue this money, but the capacity to then pursue it being the question. So that's the question that I have. And if we're going to invest $10,000 annually for the next 2 years, then do we also have an opportunity to use some money to hire capacity to pursue those dollars? Can we hire a consultant, or can we hire a grant writer or something temporarily as a strategic approach? Is there anything available to us? Because my concern is that we have opportunities that we just are more aware that we're missing and less maybe capable of pursuing it actually. So,
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, thank you for your question. I think the best way to structure this relationship, which I would suggest is probably better than what we did before, would be to say, okay, we got your green light, ostensibly, right, to look into this. What I would ask that would happen would be potentially to sit down with our partners and sit down with our team internally who know what our biggest needs are and say, okay, what is going to be our goal in year 1, and what's going to be our goal in year 2, and the team from sort of the Justin level, if you will say, well, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that, and then we're going to say the same thing. And once we get a feel for what really has the biggest kick for the effort that we can put forward, we're going to have a better feel for what we can do internally to help support that, and what outside help we might need. And we're not unfamiliar with that question, that's for sure, because as it relates to Jolene's projects, the river primarily, she has a bevy of resources that she looks into for that technical help to try to give our grant request the most legs. And that'll be a better informed proposal that we would offer to you for the 3 grants, for example, that we want to pursue at the federal level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's sequenced.
Yeah, right.
Amber, then Bruce.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Carter. I think that makes a ton of sense, because if nothing else over this first year, it helps inform us, as we've talked multiple times about creating positions for grant writers. Do we need 1? Do we need 3? Do we need 5? I don't know. And if we have somebody who really is helping to paint a picture for us, in terms of what realistically we qualify for and have a good shot of getting, I think that's just the building of that knowledge is worth $10,000. Secondly, I would say, for the amount of times that in this council we ask staff to look for grant money, we can kick $10,000 in over the $10,000 this year and next year to help equip and inform what that might look like. It comes up, I don't know, once a month at least. Are there grants? Are there grants? Are there grants? Well, this is a tool to help staff be able to answer that question for us.
Right. I would agree. Bruce.
Well, I think their main job is as an identifier. I think they identify where those grants are that we may or may not even know exist. That's the advantage to having them. But keep in mind, it's probably going to be more than $20,000 over a 2-year ask. Because one of the things that they suggested was getting face-to-face, sending people to DC. Yep. That costs money. So we're not just talking about $10,000 a year. We're talking about funding a trip to send a couple people down there to get in their face and have that discussion and paying for motels and food. Yeah. So, I mean, that $20,000 over 2 years could very easily become 30. I just want to make sure that's on the table and aware. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, extraordinary fair, and it's just again, the Wyoming way of doing that business. They're not just saying no to the community of Casper, they're saying no to, Commissioner Nell, and Amber, and the people that we just had that.
They're not saying no to me, Justin.
Yeah,
Let's just get that straight.
So
see,
that
you're the one that's going. Yeah.
The network that they provide and the people, the contacts to the decision makers and their research is exactly what you use that for.
And if I could just continue, a fair point is that is something that possibly the city council needs to consider doing, whether they go with sustainable strategies or not. I can't hardly say that. Whether they go with them or not, having a team go to Washington for events or to be able to meet people there where they're writing these bills, whether the agencies really are sending out this money, and where our congressional staff really are when they're on the job. It may be something that we should be doing anyway as a community, and so this is an opportunity to do it and actually have the foot in the door to actually have the meetings set up for us rather than just showing up.
Yeah. As a follow-up, if I may, the advantage to sustainable strategies is that we also have Advanced Casper, we have, or Visit Casper, excuse me, we have, Advanced Casper, we have City of Mills, we have Natrona, and Visit Casper and Natrona County that are also clients of theirs. So it gives us a more collaborative ideology where we're at. So that's the advantage to using them as opposed to anybody else.
Yeah, or going on your own.
Pardon?
It cuts down on duplication.
Well, it also gives you collaboration amongst the other entities within our community.
Right. And to your point also, that costing more than the $20,000 or $30,000, as you're, I'm sure aware, a number of those grants have matching dollars as well. So you're getting the consulting fee out there, but then you have to put out other dollars in some cases to receive those funds. But
sure.
It's generally worth the trouble.
Amber,
I don't have.
you're good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just looking at you.
There you go. Okay.
Did you just get in the throat?
I thought you went like this. Okay. Any other questions for Justin or the board members or anything? Okay.
Sure.
So Carter,
appreciate
do we need is this just informational? Do we need to give you any direction on at least the sustainable strategies? What's kind of the...
I think, Mr. Mayor, I think I know where council wants to go on the livability side, but indeed, if council has direction with respect to the sustainable strategy side, I'd be pleased to take that.
Can I ask one question,
Yeah,
please?
you bet.
Are, just for clarification, Natrona County, Visit Casper, Advanced Casper, City of Mills, are they on board with sustainable strategies at the current time?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So is council okay with doing that and then giving Carter room to negotiate 2 years if we need to?
Do we have the somewhere in order to,
Mr. Mayor, I was anticipating that might be a question. It is not a budgeted expense right now, and so I would suggest that the figure that we talked about last week, if you remember my standing in front of you with the screen, and there's that number in bold black numbers.
We're just picking away at it.
It was in the neighborhood of 2.9, if I remember correctly, and so this obligation would come off of that figure in the form of a budget amendment should you decide you want to do this. Okay.
Council okay with it? Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Mike.
So,
we're probably.
so if we authorize that 20,000 from 10,000, so we'll authorize that 10,000. and if
Go ahead,
somebody
Justin.
I want to invite,
Hang on.
I want to invite everybody to our next quarterly breakfast, which is October 18th, 7 a.m. at Casper College, University of Wyoming Student Union, the big hall. We have Dr. Robert Godby that's going to present on the economy, inflation. We also are going to reach out to the PAC that Advanced Casper has contributed to monetarily for the 5th cent to kind of boil that, condense that down to a local effort to see where we are with that. It's October prior to the elections. I think the timeliness would that be good. I'd like to have welcome everybody to attend.
What time, please?
7 a.m.
Oof.
You and Amber.
That's why I resigned from the
Some of
board.
us are late night people.
You lazy.
Some of it, no, lazy. Some of us work all night long.
Did you say the
Time to go to
18th?
bed, Steve.
Yes.
Did I say I
Time to go to
work?
bed, Steve.
Did I say I work?
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Breakfast will be provided.
Justin, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Please, do I need to see you to speak for you now?
I mean, you can if you
What the
want.
hell,
I was just
Kathy?
gonna ask about, like, if
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I was just gonna ask about if we're authorizing
Yeah.
$10,000, is it worth thinking
We don't all
about
go to bed at 5 o'clock.
what would be beyond that if we're gonna do a budget?
I go to bed at 5 o'clock.
I mean, can we set aside an
We thought you were going to accuse yourself of that.
Did you see it rain?
My sprinkler was on, so I knew there was water in the air.
Because we do have some training.
Oh,
It rained.
so it could just be.
Squall blew through.
I got up at 4:30 and was on the road
Well,
with the
that's
left.
fine. In my house, if we're gonna do it.
And it rained on me up there.
Okay.
Strategy around it, so
Yeah.
that we know what might be coming.
All right, let's
That's where
move
I wanna
along.
be.
Kyle
That's
recused
where I wanna
himself
be.
from this conversation. So we'll go ahead and get going. So we'll do city facility fiber. Carter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We have talked about this possibility, particularly in the context of your council goals along these lines a couple times before. Council is really concerned about trying to do things, particularly from a technological standpoint, to give our local businesses a lift. And we think we have a solution that not only does that, but also answers questions that we've been worried about and also shows up in your goals as it relates to connectivity between your facilities. And in this proposal, we think 17 facilities to be exact. As you are all aware, we are at the point right now where the relationship that we have with Spectra runs out here in just a few years. And your Spectrum, yes, correct. I almost called it Bresnan, which would have been even worse. Spectrum, correct, Charter, whatever the company is called these days, runs out, and we will not have that solution available for us. Also, however, you are aware, and we talked about this during the budget process, that we had our eyes on a grant that would allow us for, to undertake some major technological advancements in the form of putting together a fiber ring throughout the community. We have been working on that aspect of this in tandem with a private partner for months now. Certainly since the time we had put the budget together, your council goals and so on, to where we think we've got a solution and we have better knowledge. I want you to be aware that as it relates to a grant, the rules are coming out and are getting into final form. And as Michael will share here in just a minute, the rules are such that Casper, Wyoming is being written out of competition with respect to these possibilities. Mostly because we cannot make the argument that we are an underserved community. And Mike will be able to explain a lot more technical detail as to why we believe that than I can. But that's the bad news. The good news is we think we've got an outstanding proposal that'll get us to where we need to be for a fraction of what we thought we'd have to pay. And we're pretty excited about that. So we want to see if you are too. And that's why we're here tonight, because we think we've accomplished some of our problems, some of our concerns, and we think we're meeting your goals with regard to what we're proposing to do tonight. So with that table having been said, if I can defer to Michael, I'd sure appreciate that. Michael.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I guess just to start with where Carter was talking about with respect to the grants, there, as we've probably all seen at the federal level, there's been billions of dollars budgeted towards broadband. One of the key components that they keep putting into those grant monies is for underserved communities. And that is defined by a minimum bandwidth level, a minimum speed level for those communities. And it just so happens that here in the city of Casper, we have at least one provider that covers basically the whole area of Casper with a speed that is above that minimum speed to be able to qualify. And as an example, in the Connect Wyoming verbiage for their grant application process, it says, council shall not consider applications for projects in areas with reliable speeds of at least 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload, nor shall it consider projects for areas in which written agreements develop services at or above this level prior to December 31st, 2024. So not only do we already have somebody that provides that, we know that we're aware of other vendors that are building capacity in our community. So that makes it very challenging. And we've talked with like our broadband coordinator at the state level, and just not with much luck moving forward there. But as the city manager stated, we think we have come up with a very good solution that helps achieve council's goal for facilitating affordable and reliable access to digital infrastructure, also connecting our facilities in advance of that agreement with Spectrum running out. We also met with leaders in the business community around town, and they expressed frustrations with the limited available options for fiber optics, for redundancy, for reliability. So we had conversations with multiple providers, and we actually ended up receiving 3 proposals for service. Mountain West Technologies provided the most competitive of those. The agreement that we would enter into with them would be for a service. They would be providing a fiber optic service to us, where they would install the fiber, they would own it, they would manage it, but the city would have access to 12 full strands of basically Mountain West's entire network that they have built out for this project, and for a period of 30 years. Our contract that we entered into with Spectrum back in 2006 was for a period of 20 years. The vendor will also be responsible for all maintenance and repairs of the fiber. There will not be any additional costs to the city to maintain what we have. The city will also be provided access to other fiber optic cables, so not just the ones that are connecting our facilities, but Mountain West actually has fiber that are running in other areas of town. So if there may be another facility that in the downtown area where Mountain West already has fiber and the city purchases a building right there on that route, we will have 12 strands of fiber for that facility as well. The $1,013,000 cost is a quarter of that was provided in a fiber optic study that we had performed in 2015 when we actually started this research project. So we were, for the city to procure this, build it out themselves, the city own it, it was $4.5 million, and we would be responsible for the maintenance. Not only did that cost come from the study, but we had actually received a quote shortly thereafter that confirmed that cost. This, not only is it a quarter of that, but it's also substantially lower than the other two price proposals that we received. The memo that you received in your packets also has a $100,000 additional cost above that fee that we would be paying to Mountain West, and that additional $100,000 is basically for the network equipment that we would need to connect and tie in all those facilities. So they would be providing the fiber, but we would still have to provide the network equipment to plug it in. So yeah, in addition to this network from Mountain West, two other providers are also building out fiber optic networks in town right now that I'm sure many of us have already seen fiber running through the community. Between those two, if council approves this project a third, we have existing providers that are already offering high-speed internet in the area. We're going to be increasing and building up that competitiveness, increasing options for the citizens. As you can see in this map here, we will have fiber all around town. And that's, if I won't speak, I'll let Mr. Ridgway speak to how they would plan to expand it if you'd like to hear from him. But that is one of the things that they put in their proposal, is how they would expand this out. And he talked about many areas of town that they would be looking to provide internet service to the community. With that said, I'll take any questions. Great.
Bruce, one question that comes to mind is, so we're 4 years from our existing program being up. So why are we jumping ahead 4 years when we know Blue Peak's coming in and laying groundwork, and within the next 4 years we'll probably be able to bring us a viable offer? So what's the haste in doing this right now?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I'm going to probably punt the majority of that answer to Michael, but what we do know already is that in order for our current provider to provide the same service on a redundant basis, the figure that they're offering is far and above the figure that we've been able to get from one of their competitors. And furthermore, the primary element that your private sector identified as being missing with respect to the absence of projects like this is in the form of redundancy. And so if we waited for 4 years to try to help initiate a project of this nature, in IT terms, 4 years may as well be 40 years or 20 years or whatever, and our business community misses out on those kinds of service needs that they would otherwise just be absent of. So we are proposing moving forward sooner than later. But Michael, is there anything else that you would add in regards to that important question?
I don't want to put words in Mr. Ridgway's mouth, but this is also a public-private partnership. In their proposal, they said that they're basically doing this at or just above cost, and we're actually helping incentivize them to get their network built out. So we're getting a network built out for us at a much lower cost than I personally believe any vendor, like as the city manager stated, somebody who already has their existing fiber in town would have a desire to work with us. Right. And right now, the fiber optics being installed in Casper is going on at a fast and furious rate. it's a race, and this is Michael's opinion. It's a race to get their footprint out there. I was told that in one area of town, they're actually being told that the conduits are full in a Wyoming or a YDOT right of way. So these vendors are anxious right now to get ahead of the other competitors is my opinion.
Was it, just as a quick follow-up then, would we be paying both of them at least for the next 4 years then? Because we're still under contract with the other, right?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the good news is that the cost to be in the relationship that we're currently in was paid nearly 20 years ago. And so that upfront cost has long been...
So the $3.5 million we save on the back end is the...
Right.
That's the, okay,
Yep,
gotcha.
you got it.
Understood. Thank you, thank you.
And if I may, Mr. City Manager, this project will take upwards of 2 years to complete.
Okay, good. Jai.
My questions were answered, thanks.
Got it. Steve.
So the 1.1 is an upfront cost that we would have to come up with today, or would that be at the end of 2 years when the construction's complete, or at the end of 4 years when we would switch to the service?
Right now, and again, Mayor, City Manager, Councilmember, I'm sorry, Council would, definitely have that discretion, but in the agreement that would be brought before you, we have it where 50% would be paid upfront, 50% upon installation, and then 50% upon final, or 50% upon 50.
No, we're not paying 150%. No.
50 upon agreement acceptance, 25 upon final installation, and then the final 25 upon final approval.
Okay. Jai.
Thank you. This is a different question. I was wondering, you alluded to this too, but I don't know, Kyle, if you would mind telling us a little bit about the agreement and the public-private partnership. And I mean, it is so significantly more economical. So do you mind telling us a little more about that?
Sure. Kyle Ridgway with Mountain West Technologies. So what you have to remember at a project of this nature is you kind of have to have a fundamental understanding of how the internet works. And so I think we all get it, right? Like it's on my phone, it's on my computer, but like that's Wi-Fi. What's actually happening is we're replacing the coaxial cable technology that is really of 1950s era with fiber optic cable technology, which is a completely different product. So what you actually have to do is re-cable the community. And what we're really involved in right now is like it's the re-electrification of rural America, only we're using fiber optic cable as communications technology, which they think is, at the conventions that I've been at, the useful life is probably more like 50 to 70 years. There's still some fiber optic technology that's being used today that's that old. And what you're really doing is instead of using metal to conduct the signal, you're using glass to send light. So you're actually sending communication at the speed of light. And it allows the signal to go both directions at the equivalent speed, which is where you run into the limitation with coaxial cable. So on a coax or a piece of copper, the download speed can be a lot because it's designed that way, but the upload speed is limited. And where we're at is we need to live in a symmetrical society at this point with video conferencing technology where everything's got to go at the same time. Gaming, data center, whatever else. So the public-private partnership model here is we have roughly 21-ish miles of fiber in the Natrona County area. That's an existing backbone that we can start this structure off from, which is different than some of the competitors who are in the process of building an initial backbone now. So we're one step ahead of that in terms of stuff that this company did back in 2015 and things we've done over the last 9 months to build a backbone. We have agreements with other communities, namely Mills and Evansville, where we've already built backbones in those communities that our competitors don't have. So it already gives us a presence in some of the more difficult places to get. Because one of the things you have to think about is how do you cross the river and keep something underground? or if you have fiber optic cable go over the river, then it sways and you're having light reflect in the wind, and that's not an ideal solution. So we have presence on both sides of the river, and we have creative solutions to do that make it easier for us. The other difference is we actually have in-house construction. We have 3 bore drills of our own, and we have our own construction crews that we use in-house. So any of you that have worked in the construction industry know there's a difference in the pricing if you have to subcontract work versus having people with existing equipment that are employed here that you already have overhead for. So when we originally talked about this project, and I spent a lot of time, obviously, in our role at Mountain West, but also talking to Michael and spending a lot of time with broadband grants. When we originally bid it, we thought about how do we get a grant for this? And when everybody kind of came to the conclusion that there's not a creative way we can even come close to getting a grant for this, our proposal was, well, let's just get to what would this be for us to do at cost? Because in a lot of respects, this is a race between competitors. So we have an interest in trying to get to the areas of the community we want to be in. But if we can have some of our costs defrayed in doing that, that's better than not having the presence at all. And so with the city's goal being to expand broadband access, us being a third competitor, what you're already seeing is the pricing market for internet is collapsing. What I could charge somebody even a year ago versus what I can charge somebody now per gig is, 50% less, even less. I mean, we got a quote for the Keggen Court to get fiber, and it was $75 for 2 gig from Blue Peak. That's something that we would have charged somebody maybe $1,000 for a few years ago. And so now you look at it and go, having multiple competitors solves this problem because people want to get to the area first. And once you're there, that's sort of your area. So the reason we can be competitive is we really just bid it at cost, with the idea being we want to be a good partner with the city in terms of having some of our costs defrayed to build something that we wanted to build. We've done similar things with the city of Mills, with the town of Evansville. And so in Evansville, we actually are the first company that I'm aware of in Natrona County to have fiber to the residents actually live. As of back in June, we did that. And we did that with people that were employed in Casper, with equipment that was based in Casper. We have our own installers that live here that are doing that work currently. And most of that community is covered based on work that we did this summer. So we have an existing body of proof when we say we've used a municipal backbone to defray costs, and then we've taken that upon ourselves to go do it after the fact, that we would do the same thing here. There are a lot of parts of the community here in Casper that are difficult to get to. The outer areas of the community to run fiber all the way to some of these areas, it's a lot of cable, and you don't have a lot of customers along the way to defray it. But this gives us an opportunity to be in places that a company that's doing it purely on a profit basis might not ever look to go to that community, because there's only 200 homes in that part of Casper. There's only 300 homes, but we can start in the area that's densely populated with upper income because we're doing it on a business case. This allows us to bring it to areas that wouldn't otherwise do it. And so it's a true public-private partnership model because we're giving the city, the technical term for the agreement is an irrevocable right to use. It's like an easement, essentially. You have legal right to those 12 strands, and it's not just the strands that interconnect your facility, but it's our entire network that gets built out, which means you get the additional redundancy as we continue to build out. If one cable gets cut somewhere, city facilities aren't down. Whereas somebody who just wants to bid this to just connect the city facilities, you're not going to have the redundancy, you're not going to have the extra circles that you get with this proposal. So as a one of the smaller players, but one that's growing and one that's Wyoming based, we wanted to make it a public-private partnership that gives us an opportunity to do something we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And that's why we're able to bid it at the price we're able to bid it at, is because we do all the work in-house.
Thank you.
So you don't have a bunch of Colorado plates doing the work for this project.
Thanks.
All right, Texas, yeah. Other questions for Mike or Kyle? Okay. So you need us to give you a thumbs up to go forward with that, Carter?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is this money already budgeted?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the project is budgeted, but the funding is going to be different because we are not going to get the grant funding that we thought we would need. make it work. As I understand it, what we would need by way of authority at some point from council, if you're ready to do this, would be in the neighborhood of $500,000 to pay for that 50% current need and get the project started, which would come from that fund equity in the general fund that I was mentioning earlier.
Spending money tonight, aren't you?
If you let me.
Amber,
You agree?
So has this, I mean, I'm seeing the several different proposals here. Is that like subbing in lieu of some sort of formal RFP process? Like we've already gone to the providers and gotten these quotes back and this is sufficient?
Mr. Mayor, council member, exactly. Yep.
One more question. Also, the money that we have to spend, $500,000, even if there'd have been a grant in place, we would have had to spend X amount of dollars at some point to match, right? So
That's exactly right.
So we're not really out anything. We're saving money.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, and that would assume that we would have won the grant, which we wouldn't know for another year from now. So I think that the possibilities of that working, as we've already told you, is really, really slim. And I don't think you would have won that grant award without some financial commitment on the part of the city to make it match anyway.
Sure.
So I think that's a good point.
Thank you.
Good. Everybody good with it? Great. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle, for hanging with us
Thank
tonight.
you.
Hey, thanks for coming. Really appreciate seeing you. Introduce yourself. What is that?
What's left? Did you spend it all?
This is over the red.
No, there's about 2.5. 2.4.
Yes, that's right.
We're all right.
That's right. That's right.
Plenty.
Phil's over there with one eyebrow raised, so I think we're okay right now.
I was gonna say we're down to about 1.89.
2.4, Steve.
Oh, down to 1.6.
2.4.
1.6 from what? 2.9?
We're at 2.4
Yeah. No.
and some change.
No,
Not
she said
according
we
to
were
Jill.
down to 1.6.
We're not.
I'm looking at the money lady back there. She says 1.6.
No.
Alrighty. Metro funding priorities. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a follow-up item with regard to some questions council had not too long ago regarding 1 cent money, should the 1 cent be renewed in November, as it relates specifically to how we would spend those dedicated funds for Metro, the improvement of the Metro Animal Control Facility. You had asked, basically, if indeed $150,000 would be made available with the renewal of 1 cent 17, how would we allocate it and spend it and use it to improve the facilities at Metro? We have that proposal that we would offer you for your consideration. But we would also provide that proposal with the caveat that this really is a drop in the bucket as it relates to the needs that Metro has out there. Some of you have been hearing in quite a bit of detail what their views are with regard to some of those deficiencies are. We're prepared to talk not only about a $150,000 proposal, but what some of the other larger deficiencies are that $150,000 would not cover. And we all know that Metro is one of those facilities that is in desperate need, has not had much investment since the 80s when it was built, and we've got to have larger conversations at some point if you want to keep that facility in place, which may be a question that you want to entertain as well. Nonetheless, having conducted this analysis, I'd like to defer to the chief to walk us through that conversation, and we'll go from there.
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to kind of discuss. We were given the task of if $150,000 was made available to us, how would we prioritize the needs? at Metro Animal Shelter. And I can tell you, broadly speaking, as the chief of police that oversees both the care and maintenance of the animals, but also the care and maintenance of our employees there, we really struggled with how to prioritize this amount, knowing that we had several projects that the 150 wasn't going to cover it. And so we have elected to prioritize really the care and upkeep of our animals at the shelter as our first priority. So the proposal that you have before you involves 3 different projects. The first one is one that's super critical to us. We quoted as such in the memorandum before you today, which is the 5 basic needs of animals, and trying to incorporate those needs in there. Right now, we lack the ability to quarantine animals that are ill, and so many of especially the felines, they come in with illnesses and kennel cough, some of these other illnesses that can be immensely contagious in there. We lack the ability to quarantine those animals while we get them healthy, return them to health, and get them to the point where they can be adopted out. So the number one priority with this $150,000 is to renovate a room right now that was intended to be, when the structure was built, it was intended to be an overflow with dog kennels. However, the construction of those kennels was not done in a way that we can easily navigate dogs in and out of them. So they don't have the pass-through area. We would have to literally move them from one room to another one so we can clean this one. It's just not been feasible. So we would be looking to renovate that room, tearing out those kennel structures that exist that are not usable for us right now, and replacing that in such a way that we can house the animals that need to be quarantined. One of the critical aspects of that is the quarantine room has to have the HVAC separate. The circulation of that air cannot be circulated into the general population, and so that's one of the primary expenses, is establishing a different venting system for that room. The second one that we believe that we could do for this project would be to continue on. Approximately 2 years ago, we began replacing some of our very aged and dated cat kennels. And we only made it part way through that before we ran out of the monies that were available for us to continue to make that. And so the existing condition, I don't want you to imagine this, but those cats are in those kennels, those cages, if you will. But the urine that the cats produce is very, very caustic. It's very hard on metal. Over time, that really causes damage to the metal, and so we're just trying to clean those up so they're visually appealing, so that there's no rust that's apparent, and the actual structure of the cages is not compromised when it comes to opening the gate, feeding the animals, cleaning the cages and stuff, so that we're not injuring animals, we're not injuring our employees, and we're not transmitting the diseases that could be present on those rusted surfaces. So. And then the third project that we're recommending with this $150,000 is to improve the overall health and wellness of the animals by improving our outdoor amenities. So right now, when potential adopters come in, they go in and they just enter into that chaos of the rooms where those animals are held in large populations. You can't hardly carry on a conversation in there because of the barking. And so there's no place to socialize. There's no place for them to take that animal out and play catch with it. Although we have created a walking path, that's not what really the adopters are looking to do. We're just looking to improve that opportunity to get our canines, especially that opportunity for more sunlight, more open air experience, a place where they can socialize with those potential adopters, and really, enjoy being a dog while they're under our care, but really to facilitate the quicker and more efficient adoption of those animals. So, again, we struggled with our priorities because the $150,000 that was kind of the cap on this was not enough to just meet our number one priority. that number one priority is, as this council has heard, and I need to keep reiterating, we need a backup generator up there. We need to be able to ensure that our animals under our care are not up there in the summer without air conditioning, and they're not up there in the winter without heat. And so we, you know, even this week, we've had elements of our HVAC have gone down again. And so, you know, we have got to get that backup generator. That's a critical aspect for us. As many of you recall, when we had that particularly bitter cold snap this last winter, that coincided with an unfortunate reality of a loss of power up there. And so when the power went out and our brand new boilers got frozen, and that resulted in a huge economic loss to us, as we have had to replace those boilers, and even now we're still installing those replacement boilers. So that generator is extremely important to us. One of the things that has also been that we're learning as we are going through these issues is that for whatever reason, the power that we have available to us up there is particularly susceptible to surging. And so along with that, you know, along with that generator thing, we really need to incorporate a building-wide surge protection to help with preventing some of these things that's causing the damages that are occurring to some of our fixtures up there. So between the two of them, we're estimating flat out, it's a guess on our part on the surge protection. Between the two of those, that's about a $275,000 price tag to get that stable, reliable energy up there for us. In the bigger scheme of things, you know, as we're looking at caring for the animals under our care, we spend a large amount of money and a lot of our manpower and resources caring for the sick and injured of these animals, and ultimately we end up transporting those animals out to a local veterinarian, and we would like to consider in the future bringing in not necessarily adding to the footprint of the existing kind of dated infrastructure, but maybe bringing in a portable building somewhere that we can set it up as a medical room, so that veterinarians can come and take care of those emergency medical needs, the medical care, the animals that are sick and just need a diagnosis, so we can get them the medication that we need. We want to set up a medical room out there, and there's really no way to do that in our existing footprint, and I'm really hesitant to add too much footprint to a building that quite frankly I'm going to want to bring forward to you guys as in a few years as we continue to put band-aids on this thing. I don't want to waste a lot of money adding to the footprint. So that medical room in the form of a portable would be something that we would like to consider. Ultimately, that it would be advantageous to us to have a contract veterinary on our payroll, you know, a full-time employee. We're not there yet, but ultimately that would be one of the hallmarks of being a highly efficient, functioning, modern sheltering system. One of the things that we are really suffering from right now is reliable HVAC. And so, if you were to go up there today, you would say, you know, why is it stifling hot on this portion of the it's because when we have analyzed it, we've had our city people in there helping us to repair these things. What we're finding is for years we've been patching that thing together. And one of the things that we would propose to you that we're going to need in the future is a comprehensive look at what is the status of the HVAC and what is it going to take to bring that up to where it's reliable. These individual components of it aren't breaking on a weekly basis. And so we think we need a better understanding of that HVAC with the anticipation that people are going to throw up their hands and go, it wasn't designed to move the air that's required for you. It wasn't designed for these purposes, and we think that HVAC really is going to be struggling. One of the things that I think would help for the atmosphere up there, both the working conditions of the employees and the opportunities for adoption, is to reintroduce modern lighting to the facility. If you go up in there, some of those rooms are just dark. They're poorly lit, and they're energy inefficient. And we believe that money put into modern lighting and LED lighting for some of those rooms would be money well spent. Two last considerations is for the employees, both my animal control officers and the animal shelter employees. They don't have locker rooms, and yet they work in conditions where their uniforms are soiled by the end of their shift, and frankly within a few minutes of the beginning of their shift, and in the long-term viability of that building, even if we're just holding in a holding pattern and making do, we believe that there's one room that we might be able to introduce some employee lockers so that they have a chance to have a normal work environment. And then lastly, just the final nail in the coffin, as it were, the kenneling system that we have up there. That was a wonderful design when this thing was built all those years ago. But those kennels for our canines, they are not adequate. There's not sufficient room for them to have a sleeping, bedding, laying area that's going to be free from the fecal matter and the urine in their eating area. They're just not big enough. And so ultimately, what I would tell you is that there's no way for me to come to you and say we need to wipe this out on that floor plan and start over with bigger kennels, because we would be at maximum capacity if I added more space to that. But as I stand here before you today, it is somewhat it's unfortunate that those larger dogs, they do not have enough room in those kennels, and that would take a major overhaul. That's the kind of thing that at some point I would be coming to you and say, look, it's not reasonable anymore. Our community has grown. The Trona County's population has grown. As almost everybody in the room is aware, the popularity of pets has never been greater than it has been now, and so that population continues to grow. We just can't get more animals in our existing shelter, and they're already cramped as it is. So with that, I may have gone far deeper than Carter expected me to, but with that, I would take any questions.
Questions? Amber.
Thank you very much. As I look at the memo and listen to what you're saying, I'm trying to balance and weigh, what are small steps that can be done now? It sounds like you've done the same. What are small steps that can be done now? What are things that simply will not be possible or reasonable to spend money on until we are ready to have a conversation about a larger building or a new building or whatever it might be. And so as we think about this, I mean, I like the priorities that you identified for the money existing. I think that's a worthy use of those dollars. But I'm also wondering, it sounds like the HVAC, like we may be fixing that, whether we have allocated funds to it or not. It sounds like it's on its way out and could need to be replaced in an emergency scenario rather than just a planned scenario. So I'm wondering, one, was that in our proposed capital projects in this last bid or in any of that just didn't get funded, or why isn't it on a list for this budget season right now, given that it sounds like we could be needing to address it within the next 12 months, whether we've wanted to or not?
So the first answer, that is probably insufficient pursuant to the needs that we've just discussed here, was that we didn't have in the original proposal relating to 1 cent, for example, a couple million set aside to help deal with a number of issues at Metro, not the least of which would have been largely taken care of, I think, in terms of the list that the chief provided. Those repairs and those kinds of things fell away in light of the other priorities and limited dollars that ultimately came forward in the recommendation that you all, saw and vetted and reviewed and everything else. Chief, I have to defer to you though in terms of other repairs, please.
Yeah. Thank you. So first of all, when it comes to the overall viability of the entire HVAC system, we're, as stewards of the building right now, we get to learn more and more about it. It's only more recently that we're finding out this, this almost weekly occurrence of problems with it. So today, this week, a major fan has gone out. They tell us that that's from a power surge that has done that. So we're starting to link back now. Some of our major appliances. A lot of these systems. We're a little bit worried it's the unreliability of the power coming into the building and dispersed throughout the building that is causing some of those things. So when it comes to, there are things in Zulima's budget that she has prepared to continue to make improvements on there. That is part of the ongoing budget. We're fast playing catch up with the things that just continue to manifest in this, quite frankly, a systems and infrastructure that has served its useful life. And, like that car with 200,000 miles on it, the transmission, the differential, the windowsills, things start going wrong with it, and we're just in that position where we are learning on a very frequent basis. Okay, here's another problem that we didn't identify.
Thank you.
Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Chief, for all the information. I would concur with Councilwoman Pollack's assessment that I agree with kind of the priorities you've outlined: the quarantine room, the cat kennels, and the outdoor area improvement. That's things I've fielded concerns from citizens on all of those. I thank you for pointing out the HVAC. That's another thing I fielded complaints about, is kind of the state of that up there. Carter, you mentioned us and our openness to having a larger conversation about this, and I guess I would like to advocate that we have that sooner rather than later, especially in light of potential replacement of the entire HVAC system, life of the building nearing its end. I would like to get the jump on that a couple years ahead of time, and I don't know, we kind of toyed with the idea in the past, but I would love to see like a committee put together of stakeholders, other providers, city. If that's what needs to happen, is all of us get together and meet on a regular basis to figure out what the best way is moving forward, whether it's a nonprofit taking over operations of the shelter and the city just taking on the enforcement aspect of it. I would like to try to outline that vision now, so that when we, a year or two down the road, when we have to replace this building or have to completely gut the HVAC, we have a better idea of what the end goal is, as opposed to this kind of band-aid reactive approach. I'd love to have those conversations sooner rather than later, so I don't know what that looks like, but I'd be a strong proponent of it.
I would propose to maybe piggy on that, some type of a task force maybe we need to put together to start working on those issues. I know I kind of jumped in line here in the queue, but I just agree with, I think there needs to be some type of a task force probably put together for us to start looking at that. While we know it's not going to happen next year, but like the chief said, it could be something we're going to need planning on in the next couple, 2-3 years. So, Steve Cap.
I was kind of going to go along the lines of Kyle, and that yes, basically, should we be looking at a regional metro building similar to the way the Hall of Justice and the detention center are run, that basically Mills, Evansville, all of the community and the county support the structure itself, and then we figure out who's going to have the officers to bring the people in. And I think then your idea of the committee is great, and what they do is they put a plan together to when we need when we need to bring in the D8 and go from there, and how much that's gonna cost. In the meantime, you were talking about needing the doctoring facility. I know Fire was able to get a used portable from the school district that they're going, yeah, haul it off, it's yours, get rid of it. And I didn't know if you guys would be willing to visit with the hoses and see see how they went about getting one of those, and that may be a freebie for your vet deal. And the other thing I was gonna bring up was, if these are due to power bumps, then do we have, Mr. City Attorney, do we have any legal recourse with Rocky Mountain Power, because they're supposed to be providing us reliable, stable power?
You know, actually, when we had our litigation with Rocky Mountain Power not that long ago, we had that as part of their agreement. They would continue to upgrade and make those upgrades, which they did, and we get a reliability report from them, I think, every 6 months. So we can take a look at that reliability report and see if it would indicate that they need to provide a greater level of maintenance in certain areas of the community.
I got Jai, Lisa, and Bruce, sorry.
And that was the question I was gonna ask about.
Oh, so you're on,
Rocky
okay.
Mountain.
Jai and Bruce, go ahead, Jai.
Thanks. I guess I'm fully on board with kind of the longer term planning and trying to figure out, you know, what our approach is going to be over time. I'm just curious with the generator and the surge protection, that sounds like that is needed yesterday. I mean, is there anything that we can do from a budgetary perspective to at least meet those needs that may stave off some major, even more major issues in the immediate future?
You know, I don't really have a solution for you other than looking at trying to get one, you know, and install it. And so, you know, there's really no other answer to consider. I mean, if that's your direction, that's certainly what we'll do, you know.
Bruce. A couple questions. One would be, well, this is more of a comment, I guess, but putting a committee together is a great idea. The problem behind it is, this council is already aware of what the problem is. They're already aware of how to fix the problem. The problem we have is money. So we can put all the councils together you want and all the committees together you want, and they're gonna come to this and they're gonna say, we need X amount of dollars to fix this problem, which we already know. We know what the problems are. We know how much money's needed. In fact, we need a new building. The problem is, we just went through $64 million, $64.5 million. And very little was given to Metro because, based on the other needs within the city. Now, those dogs, I know the dogs in my house are like my children. They're just as important to me as my children are. They're our family. And so do we want them living like that? No, but the reality is, when it comes to the hierarchy of where our dollars go, there's just not money there. So putting committees together, I like the idea, but do I really? No, because all they're gonna do is come to us and say, this is a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem, which we already know, and we need this money, that money, and that money, which we already know. We don't have the money. So I like Steve's idea. I'd love to see a regional where the county's kicking in, and, you know, I know we get some participation from some of our, you know, Evansville Mills and whatever, but I mean, full-on participation, especially on the county's end of things, to build a new facility that actually does what it's supposed to do would be ideal. That, to me, would be more important than any committee. And then lastly, I'm just curious, why is it that we don't buy surge protectors and plug our appliances into them before they go into the power grid? That's a real cheap way of saving. Instead of finding some surge protector to protect the entire building, protect each individual appliance with a $15 surge protector, and seems to me like we'd be saving a hell of a lot of money.
Mayor, if I could respond to that, you know, first of all, again, I can't emphasize enough, as we are dealing with these issues as they pop up, and this is very recent information that we're getting, but when you think back to the dishwasher and the laundry facilities, and, you know, now it's our HVAC fans and things like that, you know, our people are, and I'm not even sure we have a conclusive diagnosis of that, what's got to be the problem. I think they're checking things off the list, but that's the current theory right now. So you're hearing from me because we're dealing with issues as we speak.
Gotcha.
Lieutenant Trumbull is spending a large portion of his time addressing these concerns as they arise, and we're acting on the best information that we have. And Mayor, if I could address one other thing, you know, there's a lot of discussion going, how would we pay for this? And so, you know, the proposal originally was, this was an appropriate capital purchase for 1 cent. And so we broached it with 1 cent. But when it came to our survey and the information that was given to council for your deliberations, there's not a lot of distinction between the police department's needs and those that are under it. And I would submit to you that animal care and sheltering wasn't really given enough, wasn't delineated enough from the overall department needs for both the citizens to provide you input and for you to make determinations off of that. So what we knew going into it is historically it's the only way that the police department can purchase the vehicles. And as you remember from just a few months ago, we presented that, hey, there's a serious vehicle issue coming our way. And so, you know, I would submit to you in you know, future 1 cent discussions that we probably need to delineate the needs of our regional animals in such a way so that the citizens can provide the feedback, and they may not list that as a priority. What we don't know is if that would have been a priority, because we listed it as public safety, and most people would not recognize that, hey, they're meaning that's coming from the police department.
Well, as a follow-up, whether the public acknowledges it or not, that's been one can that's been kicked down the road for a long time. That building is all but obsolete. We all know it. It's not functional, and we just keep kind of booting it, regardless sometimes of what the public, not everybody uses that facility. They don't know what kind of real shape it's in. Sometimes we have to make decisions on this council that don't always go with whatever the public's advising us because they don't know any better. But with that said, we've still got to find money to fix this problem. And like Jai said, if the HVAC goes out tomorrow, we're going to have to figure out where we're coming up with $250,000. Or, you know, and that doesn't address the room issues and everything else. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm really wary of putting a committee together to bring us information that we already know and creating even more frustration in an arena that's already very frustrated, if that makes any sense to you. No, and no offense, I like committees there. You get a whole lot of perspective, but the bottom line is that's going to boil down to dollars, and there just aren't any.
I guess how I see it is not a committee, I see it as a task force. And so what I see a task force is we appoint and say, this task force, who are stakeholders, we need to come up with strategy to move forward in the next 2 years with this. Because just like we did with the police department, it's about 4 or 5 years ago, council members said we need a new police department. And that was 5 or 6 years ago or something like that. And that's what happened. They started coming, started talking about it, started putting it together. And I think that's probably what this is going to end up happening. Whether we go to a nonprofit model like Cheyenne does, however that looks, we have to have a strategy to come up with. And we can hand that to the city staff and say, hey, look, how do we form this? I guess that's kind of why I see a task force.
I understand. And that makes sense.
In that sense, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
And along those lines, that's what I was getting at. When you're calling it a task force, I may have called it a committee,
yeah.
But basically having representatives from all of the entities to sit down and come up with that plan is really what I was talking about.
As a follow-up, have we ever broached a 501c3 to take that over or to look into that? Have we ever looked for someone that may be interested in, you know, the reason I asked, I know the Casper Humane Society, they dumped a multitude of money into that place they have, and they don't euthanize any animals. They keep them until they either die or they're adopted. So they've got money flowing all the time. I wonder, has anybody ever broached the subject of that becoming a nonprofit entity up there?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I would say that I am not aware of any substantive conversations along those lines. Certainly I've had the opportunity to visit with the Humane Society and learn some things about their limitations and so forth, and what their experience has been and so on. But beyond that, I would say probably not.
Well, I'm sure you'd love to have a nonprofit come in and take that whole thing from you, wouldn't you? Honestly?
I'm going to be judicious on how I respond.
How about being honest?
We spend, Mayor, it takes a high degree of management to run an efficient shelter. It does. It takes far more supervision and management time than we would have anticipated, because there are unique issues that are faced by such an operation. It's unique issues when you're putting the priority is upon living creatures, their health, their well-being, their life satisfaction. That takes a unique set of experience and know-how, but a certain degree of dedication and resources available if that's the goal. Now, we were I would tell you that we were reaching for what are the ideals here. The ideals are that the animals are treated humanely, that they're happy, that they're well fed, they're safe, and they feel loved while they're in our care. That's not always going to be possible, but the goals that I've laid out before you really are to maintain those minimum standards of what's the end goal? The end goal is that we don't have stray animals roaming our streets. We don't have vicious animals endangering our citizens and our children in our community, and that the animals that we do have are in homes. They're loved, they're protected, they're cared for, they're given medical treatment and vaccinations and all the things that they need to live to fulfill the meaning of their life.
And with all due respect, we know all this. You have not answered my question. Would it be good for the police department to have a nonprofit or another entity come in and manage and take over that facility? That's the question.
Well, I would buy my wife dinner and celebrate if you came to me tomorrow and said,
Okay.
Chief, you don't have to manage
That's exactly what I thought, but I wanted to hear it from the dog's mouth, if you will.
So I got Steve, Jai, and Amber.
One thing I was gonna ask is, do we know how big a standby generator we need? And the reason I'm asking that is, I know, for example, the standby generators that they put at Sam Hobbs and out at the regional water are huge because of the big power loads. But I look at animal control as no more than what I see out around the drilling rigs for the company man, the tool pusher, the directional driller, and all of that. And I see a bunch of iron sitting just north of town that I don't know whether we could potentially purchase or even rent one of their bigger portable generators and be able to just be out the hookup and get something like that within the next 30 days. So that was all I was going to bring up as a potential possibility, and you may have already thought about that.
Get one donated.
So I don't have my.
Get one donated.
Yeah, there you go. Get one donated.
I don't have the specific wattage
Sure.
that I need, but my people do.
Okay.
And so this is not a matter of turning on our emergency lights. This is a matter of running that HVAC, keeping the heat and the air conditioning going up there, regardless of what time of the year. And so those are not small draws on energy. We have done the research, and the quote we got back was about $250,000 for a generator that would be reliable, that would meet those needs, and not be extending beyond its useful purpose. What good is a generator if it doesn't do I got to keep the heat on and I got to keep the air conditioning on
And
if the animals are the priority.
And what I'm looking at are generators that serve about 4, maybe 5 double wide by 60-foot trailers, heating, cooling, laundromats, the whole 9 yards. So that was again though why I asked size-wise and KW and going from there. But yeah, I'm just trying to think of outside the box.
Amber.
So I think we've alluded to it a little bit, but you know, I do think this is likely one of the next big projects that we're going to have to address, and we have or are very, you know, well on our way to have successfully gone through this same process with the police building by creating a task force, by identifying funding and moving through all the necessary steps to do that. I think, you know, we've proven that model, and so maybe it makes sense to apply it here and, you know, figure out who the stakeholders are that we need to engage. Do we have the money today for it? No, but we won't have the money in 4 years for it either if we don't start thinking about it and strategizing for it now. So I think, why not just apply that model that has nearly taken us to success on another really daunting, big, difficult project to get done, and move it into this arena so that the next council isn't sitting here in 4 years asking themselves this exact same question.
Good point. Carter, is that something that we can maybe look at? I know Kyle's on the queue, but is that something we can look at? I mean, I think you were the city manager at the time when that conversation was broached about this is the police department, or were you, maybe you just were coming on.
I had just come on.
You had just come on, and we really had. It was a broad idea that was out there that was brought up by a council member that said we need a new police station. And while it was broad, it was kind of just unheard of that we were like, well, there's just no way we're going to do it. So it started out as a $50 million building, and then it morphed because of the conversation. I know Steve and several other people are on the committee to create that. And so is that something that we can maybe look into in the next little bit to figure out how we can do those things?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to revisit that point and advocate again. What I believe to be the benefit of a task force is primarily the exploration of this idea of whether a nonprofit model would help us reach those goals. I do think that if the city was 100% shouldering the burden, at least as things stand now, it's virtually impossible to imagine how we'd come up with that money. But if a nonprofit model would open up avenues of funding that currently are restricted to us, I imagine that's the case. I imagine that's why most people form nonprofits, is because it opens up access to other funding. I also wonder if us being a government entity, there's a lot of bureaucracy that comes with that, and so my guess is that makes it more expensive, and there's more rules and regulations, and so perhaps a nonprofit model could, you know, allow those folks to operate in a leaner, kind of more efficient way. And then also, I've remarked on it before, but the folks that are passionate about animals in this community are extremely passionate, extremely generous with their time and their resources, and I just don't think the current model leverages that energy, that enthusiasm, that passion. There's folks that'll spend every waking moment of their free time taking care of animals that aren't theirs, and so the model I'd love to see us using is one that utilizes, you know, that cuts down on costs, it cuts down on staff, it cuts down on a lot of things. I'd love to leverage that energy in the community as much as possible, because that's going to keep things cheap.
Well, Cheyenne certainly, Amber and I have spent a little bit of time talking to Cheyenne a little bit and talking about their model and what they're doing. We've talked to the mayor there, and it's taken some time to build it. It didn't happen overnight.
50 years.
Yeah, 50 years. Yeah. So I mean, it's taken some time. So I know we're not going to do this overnight, but there's other models that we can focus in on. I think the city still does the enforcement aspect of it, but the nonprofit runs the shelter itself. And it seems like it's a decent model that we could go down that road, but I don't think we can do that in a night talking in this group. I think a task force can go down and do the research, do those things that need to be done, and maybe if we can, you know, put that forward, I think we can do some cool stuff with it. So, Stephen and Jay.
I would recommend that the next time you have your, commissioners meeting, mayor commissioner breakfast, bring that up amongst the other entities about forming that task force
I will.
and get their pulse on where they're going from that standpoint.
We'll have a commissioner on.
Yeah, I realize we've already got a commissioner pro tem, maybe.
Jack?
I totally agree with that, and I also just want to say, I do think we need some interim solutions, and I don't know, I mean, I know that there are budget implications, but none of us want to be fielding calls when we can't keep animals alive, so, I just would request or advocate however it works to put that on our priority list and figure, I don't know if we can look for a generator, I don't know if we can look for one to be donated, but it just seems to me that that's a crucial next step as essentially a Band-Aid solution right now, but I think we should do it, I don't know.
Carter, I know you have a lot on your guys' plate, no matter what. Is it possible that you guys could maybe look at just some possibilities of what some solutions might be? Other than, I mean, I know your one solution was buy it.
Can we buy a generator?
Maybe you come back and, I don't know, is that something to as we're looking at mitigation? Is that?
Before you say you're gonna buy one, can I have permission of the council to explore, once we find out what size we need? There are plenty of opportunities and folks that I could reach out to that have the resources to possibly donate one to Metro. And I'd be willing to do that if I have the permission of the council to do so.
Yeah. Amber, you want to say something real quick?
Yeah, maybe Chief alluded to this, but we had additionally a line item in 5th Cent, and I think it made it through to the final iteration, but just for general HVAC, from our buildings study that we did we not, is that still there, that like line item for 2.1
You got the
million dollars
10% on
of
each
the
one.
10%. So I mean, this is what we're talking about, right? As we go through all these HVAC systems, we did set some money aside to start repairing or replacing some of our facility HVAC systems. So it may be in 1 cent that this money does exist if this is in fact identified as one of our problematic HVAC systems that needs upgrade. Is that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember, I would say that probably is one of the higher priority buildings, given its, you saw the same trajectory that I did, how soon those buildings and those systems would be absolutely cratered.
Okay. And it doesn't solve our generator issue.
Right.
But perhaps HVAC.
Or at least a portion of it.
Yeah, it might be in play on this 1 cent as well.
So, before we have maybe Bruce going and doing that, do you want to do a little research first, Carter, about a generator yourself as a city staff, or what do you want to do?
Well, I certainly think we've got a lot of the homework done, Mr. Mayor, as far as what we think our need is in that circumstance. And if council's okay with our furnishing those specs to Councilman Nell, who may have that option to find them.
Council's good with that? Okay.
I think that's an exercise worth doing.
Okay. Sounds
Can
good.
you email it to me?
You bet.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm not promising anything, but I'll damn sure reach out, and I got some friends with some pretty deep
Thanks,
pockets,
Chief.
so.
Appreciate it. And maybe you can take your wife out to dinner sometime on that.
I was gonna say,
Hopefully.
that's nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah, what are they gonna tell me?
I do want to say, though, I think the chief has done an admirable job of really working hard to maintain, and he's done a nice job of answering questions. I know Amber's worked a little bit with it, and so she's sat on many meetings, and Chief and Tremel have done a nice job of conversing with us and talking to us and keeping us up to date, as there have been some concerns, as they know, so they don't need to be browbeat over that. But we're getting there, and I do believe that we're in the right process and trajectory of heading forward. Amber?
Can I just add that I want to also let the council know in so many of those meetings it has become very clear that the department has been making enormous improvements and strides in the things that are within their control. I mean, some of the things that we talked about tonight are not, and so they're sort of beholden to the funds that have been provided to manage those things. But in all of the other items that they can improve without expenditure or with minimal expenditure, they've given me dozens, more than dozens of examples of improvements that have been made up there. So a lot of great work going on up there. We have a role to play in the next sort of steps of that, right?
Bruce.
Well, I just want to tell Chief, nobody appreciates you more than I do. You run the largest budgetary department in our city, I believe, and there's a lot of things to balance, and you do it as eloquently as you can, and I get that, and I'm just fearful that sometimes you feel like you're getting pounded on the head sometimes, but I mean, the job you do is very much appreciated by me. I know there's just so much involved in it, and we appreciate you doing all you can with what you have, so.
All right, thanks everyone. Agenda review, Carter.
Mr. Mayor, Council, we're bumping up against the time that we committed to getting you out of here, and so I don't have a whole lot to bring up except just a couple things as it relates to the agenda, or at least the battery of agendas that we're proposing for the next couple of months. Next meeting, in pre-meeting, we have some follow-up that we'd like to go over with you as it relates to the wind hinge possibility. And as you may have seen in one of my previous emails, the word wind hinge may actually be a term we can't use. And so be mindful of that as we go through that conversation. The reference was made earlier to the North Platte River Park subdivision. That public hearing takes place next week, or I should say next meeting, not next week, because next week we actually have a fifth Tuesday. But and that's where that rezoning process takes place. Or
And no one showed up in favor of or against in the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for that.
Great, great, great. Very good. As I mentioned, we've got a lot of agendas kind of coming together here over the next couple months. And just a couple highlights from the budget, or excuse me, the 1 cent vetting process. One of the other items that kind of fell out of the mix there was the Station 1 design discussion. The chief has been anxious to have that conversation with all of you, and indeed that is coming up on the 13th. Obviously we have some other items for that night as well, as you can see there, that I would suggest are also some element of follow-up as well as direction we just simply need from you. The SRO program we're anticipating bringing back to you on the 27th of September, and again along with a number of other items that hopefully you'll appreciate discussing. Let's see, going forward, I always like to kind of refer to the very back page that gives you sort of a horizon perspective with respect to a number of other discussions and topics and directives that we need your help with. Certainly from the standpoint of, kind of seeing what's on our horizon, but also with respect to possibly seeing something that needs to be inserted there that perhaps isn't right now. So that's a little bit of a heads up and a request for your input if needed. And that's all I have by way of agenda.
Thank you. So as far as future agenda items, I'd like to look at and ask the council to, we're getting very close to having a non-discrimination ordinance. It's been drafted. It's kind of going through some review right now, but we're very close to that. We want to get it in front of the chief and get his sign off on that, which is going to be in the works here. But I would like to see if we could get it on a timetable on a work session and get that and discuss it, go through and see what that looks like. It's been modeled off Cheyenne's city ordinance that they did, and so we've seen the first draft of it. The committee has, Amber's seen it. Kate Allen, who's helping us out with it as well, who's an attorney here, has been working with John. Really likes it. They're going to make some suggestions, but it looks really, really good, and I think it's a real solid, prudent ordinance for non-discrimination in the city of Casper. So, let's see if council would be okay with trying to move that in the next few weeks.
To a work session?
To a work session, so we can look at it. And I know the chief still needs to see it to kind of sign off on it.
Steps, but it's
We're almost there.
So close.
Almost there.
I was literally just asking her about it.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, we'll be meeting on elements of this document tomorrow to try to continue docketing things. And we could certainly have a date assigned by virtue of our discussion tomorrow and put it forward in the next grid document for the packet this weekend.
Great. That'd be great. And then as long as the chief gets to see it after we're done, because I know we're almost done getting it completely edited and done to the last, and then that'll be sent over to the chief. So perfect. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Something too.
Oh, Amber,
If
go
we're
ahead.
adding to the agenda,
Yes.
are we?
Yeah.
I know I was gonna do a
Yeah, that's
review.
gender review stuff. So
Okay.
you want to add stuff?
I would like to get on a work session if council is open to it, some review of our special event permitting process, particularly as it's been playing out in the OYD. Had a few, I'm the OYD committee liaison, and had a few emails, talked to city staff a little bit about it. As that area is growing and we are seeing more and more venues and more larger scale events down there, I want to review our permitting process, how those things are working to make sure they're keeping up with the growing sort of demands and vibrancy of that area. Make sure that they're, you know, helping us facilitate the things that need to be facilitated down there.
Is that connected to some of what we've been hearing about noise and, yeah, okay.
And a broader,
Yeah.
you know, is it serving the entire growth of that area? But yes, that's
Yeah.
one element of what has been raised.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I support that.
Is everybody okay with that? Yep. Putting that on a work session? Kyle, do you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to just, you know, it's possibly working its way through the funnel, but the BYOB ordinance suggestion, we had Mr. Hollier speak to us at our last meeting about his intent to create a bottling club establishment. Sounded like he was already under contract for a location at that time, and so I know his timeline is tight. That doesn't necessarily need to dictate ours, but if there isn't a tremendous amount of underlying research and kind of background we need to put together for that, I'd love to see that scheduled sooner rather than later.
Yeah, because they are paying their lease already, from what he said.
Yeah, but he said that this was not contingent on that they're
Right,
supposed to just
but it would certainly help them.
So as early as we can.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we actually have a meeting with that team this week, is that what you said? Yeah, to try to define exactly what it is they're asking, and that'll help us refine our suggestion to you by way of an ordinance proposal, which, as you know, is a 3-reading process and so forth, and they know that too. So I think they understand that a time commitment is necessary to have, if indeed an ordinance change is requisite.
Sure. And I figured we'd have to have 3 readings, that's why I'd love to start it earlier, you know, because it's at least, you know, 6 weeks to get through those.
Yep.
Okay. So you'll meet with them first and maybe get a clear picture.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly. And that should happen this week.
Great.
Thank you.
You bet.
Anything else? Okay, we'll go ahead and do anything on the legislative side.
Just as a heads up, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have the Corporations Committee holding their meetings in Casper this week, starting Thursday morning and continuing through Friday, probably around lunch. One of the things that we're going to be talking about with them, both from a WAM perspective as well as the 6 cities perspective, is liquor legislation and some of the ideas that we've talked about as a group, and seeing what kind of traction that those ideas might have. So far, each one of those ideas are on their agenda, so we're really looking forward to seeing what that conversation produces. But if any of you wanted to attend, we do have that agenda, and we'd be happy to make that known to you so that if you want to come, we'd be more than happy to be with you in that discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, question on that one. The Amendment A that we'll talk about on the 27th, that's just, is that just a kind of information? It says direction requested, but I wasn't sure what would be requested at that time.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the idea there really would be more from an informative perspective, answering questions and those kinds of things. If there's a particular representation the council would want us to make, I guess that could potentially be some direction that we would receive. But beyond that, I'd say it's largely informative.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. All right, let's go around and see what's going on. Amber,
I already said my things.
you already said your piece.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Bruce.
Got a few things. Number one, I wanted to thank Mr. Sweeney. I'm sorry he did not win re-election. He has been just a great partner for the city of Casper. He's done a lot of good for us. This is just me personally. Looking at his body of work, he will be greatly missed. I hope whoever takes his spot cares about Casper as much as he did. He was good for us. Secondly, I attended just for a little bit, the Ian Munsick concert this weekend at David Street Station, which was the absolute largest gathering we've ever had in that area. It was jam-packed. There had to have been 5,000 or 6,000 people there. He really appeals to the younger crowd, but everything went off without a hitch. There was a good police presence. Everybody behaved. It seemed to go really well, and it was really well received. So kudos to David Street Station for bringing him and the show that he put on. Afterwards, as I was walking home, I got to meet Mr. Jeffrey Starr. My wife and I visited with him and his boyfriend for about 30 minutes. Wonderful guy. He's been doing just some amazing things for this community. Jobs. He sold his place in California. He's living here full time now, and I really actually enjoyed talking to him quite a bit. But just love what he's done for our community, and we talk about building Casper and bringing businesses, and that's a prime example of someone who came to our community, fell in love with it, and has given back tremendously. So thank him for that. And lastly, I just want to say, Steve, you and I butted heads probably more than anybody else on here, but I appreciate you more than anybody. I backed your campaign for commission. I think you'll do great there. It's been just absolutely wonderful getting to know you and working with you, and it's a shame you're leaving us so early, but I sure appreciate all you've done for this city and all the capacities you've held, so thank you for all that. That's all I have.
Joy.
I don't have anything specific, although I'll just add on and say thanks and good luck on the next and in the new digs.
Steve Guy.
I wound up going to the Gaming Commission meeting this morning and primarily sat in for, as did Councilwoman Ingebretson. And basically, it looked like the county, Campbell County, and I know at least the two of us, because we have been getting calls about the proliferation of the horse track betting. Yeah. And they had as well. And basically, those were some suggestions, even though it's got to go to the legislature to change any of those things. But basically, us and Cheyenne are the two biggest ones. We have 548 machines in Natrona County, and there's an application before them for another 160. And Laramie County has 560 of those machines. But basically, they said, and wanted to know if we were interested in trying to, like, have the legislature set up something through either our association, the Commissioners Association, and potentially WHAM, if we want to try to get anything changed on a statewide level. And everything from that standpoint, a lot of them there going, yeah, we're giving all this money back, we're giving all this money back, but I thought it was interesting that, what was her name? Ms. Bearcat, was it? Wildcat.
Yeah, I think it was Wildcat.
Anyhow, she brought up the point about it affecting primarily the lower echelons from a socioeconomic standard and driving them further down in things. And so she and the commission were interested in how they were affecting our police calls and our other portions of our population. And so, yeah, I would be very interested because most of them have liquor licenses, so I would be very interested to see how that comes about when we come next March on liquor license reviews to, if they're getting an inordinate amount of calls for service. So, and then I have a CPU meeting in the morning.
Thanks. Oh, Amber?
Whenever, before you get to your reports, but I neglected my committee reports, so if I can get another one.
You wanna do it now? You
Okay,
can.
sure. I did have an MPO meeting and an Economic Development Joint Powers Board meeting last week. Economic Development Joint Powers Board, we got some project updates, nothing really new there, but you were just informed by Justin. The thing I really wanted to tell you was about this upcoming quarterly breakfast. I hate waking up at 7 a.m., but I might actually go to this one because, well, earlier than 7 a.m., but the speaker's really very good. I've been to a number of his presentations, and so I think it'll be really useful, relevant perspective to get. So I invite you all to that. And then for MPO, we've got some exciting things happening with our signage at Transit. So you'll be seeing some new signage there that I think is really clear and accessible and gives a lot of great information in a very small footprint for our citizens. And one thing that I was really excited about for MPO is that the new director at MPO brought back the Citizens Committee update, and so we had the Citizens Committee there talking a lot about some really specific ways to improve pedestrian safety that I thought were really helpful and good for the MPO to understand. And one opportunity for public participation with the MPO again is at September's Art Walk. They will be having an opportunity to weigh in on the Western Gateway Corridor study. So I think they've been posting up at most of the art walks, which I think is a great place to interact and interface with the public. So I'm appreciative of MPO for that initiative. And if you see them out and about, go talk to them, see what study or project they're working on, and give your input. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Amber. Kyle?
Thank you, Mayor. Had a couple board meetings myself, Casper Housing Authority, Downtown Development Association, nothing of note, just kind of business as usual. I also attended the In Munset concert, and I'm just amazed. Crowd was enormous, and amazed at just how well it went. I don't know, I'm sure the police officers and the private security that they hire for the event do a good job addressing things as they crop up, but man, 5,000-6,000 people down there, and I personally wasn't witness to anything that I would consider unruly or irresponsible behavior. So just an awesome gathering. I went to Patty Fiasco and Graham Good the night before, and that was another great show. So just I guess thanks to the DDA for continuing to bring those great acts and get all our people downtown and enjoying time together. All else I really have is just thanking Councilman Johnson for his service and thanking Vice Mayor Friel for his as well, echoing other people's thoughts. I wish you luck. I've really enjoyed your perspective on council, and I'm disappointed you're not going to stick around for continued discussions on the armored vehicle, but
I might show up.
all right. So, but no, I just really appreciated your perspective again. Thank you for your service. Good luck with County Commission, and enjoy the new house.
Lisa?
Well, I'll start off with the 5150. I also attended. I went to the day and then went back for the concerts. The only thing that I just wanted to note is just that every single garbage can was overheaping with garbage absolutely everywhere. So maybe in the future, probably need to get a few more cans out there. It was pretty bad.
I don't think they were expecting that many people.
No, I mean, like, there was garbage everywhere. It was bad, but it was an awesome event. The Wyoming Gaming Commission, the one thing I did want to add is that Campbell County has found the need from their proceeds that they received. They've had to set up some funding for adult counseling for addiction. So they have earmarked that, and so they're the only ones in the state who have done that. Just because I believe all the horse racing originally kind of really got kicked off in Campbell County. So
Interesting.
yeah, so they have started that process. And I want to say thank you to the chief for his report. I really appreciate that report. It was very detailed, and it was exactly what I was looking for. So I appreciate your time and your effort. And of course, Steve, I'll be bugging you all the time anyway, so.
Thanks, Lisa. Vice Mayor.
Well, I also went to the 5150 Festival in Muncie, and yeah, enough said about that. I mean, it was just a massive group down there, and no problems that we could see, so that was awesome. Busy Casper meeting today, still looking for a CEO over there. We have 3 more candidates that they're looking at right now, so hopefully we'll see something on that pretty soon. Other than that, as I said, this is it for me at the end of the month, and last meeting tonight. I appreciate, this council has been, this sitting council has probably been the best one. Not to take away from the last, the 2 years ago, but I just think that we have some very informative conversations, and we respect each other's perspective on things, and I think we get a lot of things done, and I think you will continue to do that. So I just appreciate my time working with you. I want to tell you I appreciate my time with you, Carter, during COVID. It was probably the best time of my life, but no, but well, and both of you, I mean, going through that, you get a pandemic thrown at you like that, and there's no playbook to it. There's you got to just make the best decisions you can as you go along and make things happen. But in the middle of it, we also signed CNFR up for another 5 years, and so gotten a lot of good things done in the last few years. And I hate the fact that I'm leaving 4 months early, but I also passed this opportunity up twice before, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look out for my family on this one. I am moving out to the county, so going on the commission, it makes sense. So, and the only thing I would bring up is, I know that you guys are all dying to hear this, so there's going to be openings now on regional water, CNFR, Visit Casper, Advanced Casper, Trona County Health, OID Board, and the PSCC, and I probably missed a couple more. So, so anyways, just lighten my load by about 8 boards.
So one of the things that I'll say is that I was going to talk about that. So once with Steve vacating and Sean vacating, it's obviously going to leave some vacancies in some committees. I know some of you guys want some things that you were interested in.
What's that say?
And so if you would,
you were on it.
Huh?
You're
I
on
was
it.
the alternate. No.
So what we'll do is, if you're interested, if you wouldn't mind
So
sending
right now, I'm the real one.
if you wouldn't mind sending me an email of some of the ones that are open. Actually, you know what I might do is I'll have Renee send out. I'll have Renee send out. Would you have Renee
Absolutely.
send out a email with the
Committee assignments.
And especially the openings of Sean and
Absolutely.
on a personal note, it is kind of tough to obviously move forward. Steve and I have worked together for the last couple of years. I was his vice mayor, vice versa. It was nice to be able to bounce stuff off of him, and being able to do that. I found first time a couple times on city council when I was first on, I found it just like, because I have this type of sense of humor where I'd like to laugh, I like to have a good time, and it just seemed like the first few cycles of council was like nobody really wanted to laugh, nobody wanted to do that. So Steve certainly fed my humor and understood that, and I appreciated his opportunity to do that. He was a great leader. He's going to do great at county commission. I have no doubt in that. He's pragmatic. He listens. If he doesn't agree and with the issue, and you talk to him about it, he's willing to change his mind, and he's willing to do those things. You don't find that often, because sometimes, including myself, can be bullheaded and not want to. And Steve has that quality about him. So he's a great leader, and will do some really good things in the county, and we'll run to you, I'm sure. So thanks. Yeah, we'll be at breakfast. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. So with vacancies, that also means that the vice mayor seat will be open. Carter and I discussed, and we talked with to find out what that would look like. Since it's an interim period, it gives me the opportunity, I can appoint someone, and so I think I'll go down that road of appointing someone if they're interested to fill that seat for 4 months. And so I'm not going to take that under advisement on who I'll appoint. If you have some suggestions, let me know. I'll probably appoint someone. So
Good.
that's all I got. Thank you, everyone.